Alright, looks like we are live and up and running. I see some folks in the chat. What's up, Lion Tamer? Naked Snake? Let us get up and running and kick off today's chill stream. I'm gonna jump over to the main chill stream layout. There's some stuff I wanted to sort of talk about real quick just for general channel updates, and then we'll get into the cancellation. Alright, let me turn on. Got the BGM running in the background. Folks, let me know if I need to drop the levels or raise it. It should be in the background, shouldn't be too loud, but let me know if I need to fix it. Hey, I see Penguin's here. Penguin says, "You got boost power?" Is that a Star Fox reference? Naked Snake says, "Wait, I don't know what's going on. Are we canceling somebody?" There's a good chance that I'm going to get canceled for my opinions. That generally seems to happen whenever I do tier list streams. But on the topic of things that people care about, Naked Snake, you might get a kick out of the second tier list we're going to be doing. I've got 2 on the docket today. I've got... Okay, Penguin says F-Zero reference. That was going to be my second guess. The first one we're going to do is a bit of a warm-up. Shouldn't take too long. But the second one is a big tier list that I teased last time we were on stream. And it's fighting games. A big fighting game tier list. So you might get a kick out of that one, Naked Snake. Alright, let me adjust my volume. I think I'm going to leave the BGM where it's at, and you folks can tell me if I need to fix it or whatnot. Sorry if I sound a little bit nasally this morning. My allergies have been acting up as it gets warmer where I live. I'm going to try not to sniff directly into your guys' ear. It should go away as we talk. I woke up not too long ago because I may have been up a little too late playing Elden Ring last night, but let's not worry about that. So upcoming things on the channel. We finished up Thursday's session of God Hand, and we're looking at the final one next week. Unless something weird happens, which shouldn't. I don't see why I won't finish the game. We're right at the end. And I left off where we stopped because both Wazzy and Matt will be joining me on the stream next week, and we will hopefully close out God Hand. And my grand total of failures will be on display for the full internet to see. But that should be fun. If you folks have never seen the end of the game, you'll get a kick out of it. It's not going to be easy. But one thing I wanted to talk about was something with the schedule that sort of is relevant to today. Originally on the schedule, I was going to be doing Pokemon today, but I had to move some stuff around because I need to take care of some stuff in the afternoon today. But once we finish God Hand, I'll most likely be slotting Pokemon into the Thursday slot, at least for 1 or 2 weeks. I have to look at the schedule and see. I do have some stuff planned that is going to require some co-host collab in the future, but I think I want to give the Toxic Gear team a break since they've been jumping on with me every week. Walsey says, "Oh Christ, what do I have to yell at you for this time?" Oh, you'll see. I think we'll have a good discussion on at least one of the 2 tier lists. Penguin says, "Obstacles are opportunities. Raku, use your failures as learning opportunities for growth." Well, if failures are opportunities for growth, then the God Hand Let's Play is going to result in rampant growth in all directions because it's nothing but failures. But it's been fun. I really enjoy playing that game. It'll be good to close out. Lion says, "So no canceling Wazzy?" We'll see what Wazzy says. Generally, it's me who gets canceled whenever I do tier list streams. Naked Snake says, Adam Sandler F tier. I feel like you can't put Adam Sandler and his whole body of works on F tier because he's done some really good stuff in his films in the past. I would probably put Adam Sandler on like mid B tier based on the entire track record. Penguin says Wazzy F tier. No, let's wait until people actually do something cancelable before we start ranking them. So we'll most likely be slotting Pokemon into Thursday's slot for a little bit, and pushing that further out will give me some time to grind since I haven't gotten back to it since we played it before. The rest of the stuff we're going to be doing will be sort of fit in between. I have to figure out next week's schedule, but I would like to return to Rise and do some more grinding in high rank. I will most likely be doing Jam Stream next week. More BGM practice. It's going to be kind of a dedicated stream for making some tracks. And maybe we'll mess around with some sampling too. I haven't quite decided yet. That'll get posted tomorrow once I iron everything out. But other than that, we are plugging along. I did mention on Twitter that the Twitch affiliate goal is rather close. Closer than I expected it to be, since I've only been doing this for maybe a month on Twitch. The quote-unquote debut here on Twitch was middle of January after the Dead PC saga. So maybe a little over a month at the end of February now. So the amount of people that have jumped on to follow and hang out has been great. So thanks to all of you folks for doing that. I know a lot of you came over from Wazzy's community. So I do appreciate it. But we'll see what happens when the poll on Twitter winds up in several days, and that'll determine what kind of music I sing and embarrass myself in front of all you folks. But I think that's about it for channel updates. If I think of anything else as we're talking, I will bring it up. So let's jump straight into the cancellation, shall we? Let me switch layouts to tier lists, make sure everything is up and running. Okay, got everything loaded here. So like I mentioned, this first one's a bit smaller and should be relatively quick. It's kind of a warm-up, but it's one I talked about on previous tier list streams. And this is video game controllers. And this goes back all the way to Atari. So we've got quite a bit of a time spread here. Snake says, I watch Wazzy streams. I need somebody to balance it out. That's fair. If you need a more chill vibe to balance out the Chaos Gremlin energy, then I understand. But yes, I figure folks who have a lot of experience playing video games, which I'm assuming is all of you, we're going to look at a spread of video game controllers going across the eras. I don't think it's every single one, but it's the big ones. The big platforms, the ones that most people know from back in the day up through current gen. I don't think at current gen like PS5 and Xbox One X are on here, because this one I believe is DualShock 4. So there's no DualShock 5 or whatever the Xbox iteration, because this is Xbox One, I'm pretty sure. I see Wazzy reacting to shots fired in the chat. Hey, Red Dragon's here. What's up, Red Dragon? Welcome to the tier list stream. It's the show with hot tiers and hotter takes. Red Dragon says, nothing much. You? Well, we will find out shortly. These always tend to get me canceled, but that's okay as long as it's entertaining. So I've divided the tier list out just by looking at some ones that I have not used before. I don't know what this is off the top of my head. I wonder if that's... because I can't read it. That looks like Sega here. I wonder if it's Master System Controller. I've never used it, whatever it is. I remember the Genesis controller. Let me look. Yep, that is the Sega Master System Controller. Okay, I've never used that one. It's funky. It's got a really funky looking D-pad, but it's very similar to the NES controller. But that one, the Famicom, I don't know what this is. This looks like a Famicom, maybe a Super Famicom additional type of controller, kind of like the NES Max. But by the button configuration here, I'm going to assume it's one of the Famicom controllers. And then this one's Super Famicom. The Japanese controllers I've never used, so I put them here in the never used category. Naked Snake says, fun fact, I have a Mega Drive or Master System controller in my room. Penguin says, the only person that really cancels you is Wazzy, and usually fails like usual. I'm interested to hear other people's experience with some of these as we go. Penguin says, that white one is an Apple Pippin control. Oh, this one? Interesting. I think we've got everything else captured, so let's go ahead and get started. And I think we're starting with the one that was at the bottom of the console tier. We're starting with the Wii U Tablet. Wii U Tablet, oh boy, D tier. Not a good controller. Again, going back to our debate on whether or not the Wii U was considered a failure, commercially, I wouldn't say it was a failure. It did sell units, but it was not a good follow-up to the Wii. In Nintendo's eyes, I'm sure it was a failure, but it had a decent library of stuff, which keeps it out of like an F-tier console for me. But this tablet is garbage. I will not defend the tablet at all. It was clunky. The way it was integrated in a lot of games was also clunky. It was built fine. Like, it was a durable piece of hardware, but it was not implemented well. It was good for a couple things, kind of like Penguin's saying, but easily the biggest detriment to the console was the tablet as its main controller. You could do other things, like I think you could hook Wiimotes up to the Wii U and use other controllers, but the fact that the default main peripheral controller for it was the tablet brings it way down. While this isn't looking and getting called out, focus on Raku's takes. I can suck on my own. We'll only cancel Wazzy if she pops in and drops a hot take. Unless we're Penguin. I think Penguin is Wazzy's unofficial nemesis here on the stream. But I'm sure it's all in good fun. But yeah, there's not much to really defend with the Wii U controller. It also wasn't really ergonomically well designed. So if you're trying to play an action game like Bayo 2, for example, one of the things I got on that system, it didn't really feel good. You had to get like a classic type controller. And I can't remember if they designed a classic controller for the Wii U specifically, because we had like the Wii classic controller down here, which was pretty good. And I believe you could plug this in and hook it up on the Wii U. I don't remember. But yeah, D tier for the Wii U tablet. Oh, is this it? Is this the Wii U classic controller? Let me look. Yeah, I think it is, because this is the Switch classic controller over here. Let me double check. Snake says, I mean, you tend to do it to all of us all the time, Wazzy. And Penguin says, what do you expect from the Prince of Puzzles? That's true. All right, let's see. Wii U Classic. Oh no, this isn't the Wii U Classic controller. The Wii U Classic control, It is, but the one I'm looking at in the picture is really glossy. The Wii Classic Controller, there's another one. There was one that was black. This is called something different. It's like a Wiimote Classic Controller. But there's another one that was on the original Wii system that's not in this list, looks like. Let's go. Hey, my raid sound notification. Good, it works. I see Bits is raiding the party. What's up, Bits? Thanks for the raid. Welcome to the tier list stream. You're just in time for my terrible opinions. And welcome, folks, from Bits' stream. Hope you guys had fun there. Feel free to hang out and listen to my cancelable opinions. But going back to the... Bit says, no problemo, your never used is embarrassing. I never owned a Sega system. I played on some of the old ones. And the fact that I never owned a Famicom system, I guess means I lose some gamer cred. But that's okay. Orange Swindler followed. Thanks for the follow, Orange Swindler. But Sourlat says, hello, friends. Hey, what's up, Sour? Welcome to the stream. We are fully underway with having terrible opinions. Alright, so this is the Wii U Classic Controller. I'm going to put it on B. It's fine. In fact, compared to the tablet, if it was just between these two, it'd be an S tier. But if you wanted to play a game that required precise controls, thinking specifically Bayo 2, yeah, it was much better. Cyrus says, 8 more follows until affiliate. That's true. We are getting ever closer. Which is another reminder, I don't like to plug my social stuff at all, but when it comes to things you folks might enjoy, if you haven't already, be sure to vote on the karaoke poll on my Twitter. And make sure you make your opinions known about what you want me to sing. Once it closes, then I'm going to have to start preparing set lists. So it's up there. I'll be up there for several more days. I put it up there for a week. Red Dragon says, why 2 Switch controls? I'm going to assume just because it's 2 control layouts. I'm talking about this and this. So I'm going to treat them separately, even though it's the same controller. But we'll go ahead and move on to the Switch's docked, what do they call that? Is it the classic controller version? The main thing where you slot the Joy-Cons into the Switch itself? It's fine. I do think the orientation of the Switch's buttons and analog sticks being offset like that is kind of weird. So I'm going to put it down on B tier, but it's perfectly functional. Snake says, Nintendo Switch controllers go C tier. Penguin says, I only use a classic controller once. Naked Snake says, go Japanese rock, we need Machine Gun Kiss. Wazzy says, you don't want Never Gonna Give You Up. I did mention that's on the 80s list. What I'll most likely do once the tier list is closed, or the poll's closed, and I have the tier or the set list for the karaoke stream done, I'll put up a picture of a redacted version on Twitter with parts of it blanked out, and you folks can see if you can guess what's going to be on there. It'll be song titles, but no artist. So we'll see. All right. So yeah, the original Joy-Con configuration is okay. It's fine. I don't really use it because I play my Switch undocked. But the Joy-Cons as a kind of NES controller layout, I've used this before, like playing on the go with friends in like a multiplayer game. It's fine, but in fact, I'm putting in C. It's fine, but if you're trying to play something that requires tight controls, it's tough. It's a little bit small, but again, if you're not playing something really complex, you could play Smash with this, but it's hard. As long as you're doing something that's not too complicated, it's fine. But I'll put it on C tier. The Switch Classic controller, I'm going to put this one above the Wii U one. Again, it's fine. People had issues with this controller having input lag and its controllers inputs themselves being kind of wonky, but I've never had that problem. Again, I play my Switch undocked most of the time, but when I've hooked mine up, docked, and then I connect this controller, it's fine, even completely unwired, wireless. Well, he says, Raku should take songs from all options. I thought about that too, Wazzy, but I'm going to do dedicated genres for the first one. We'll see in the future. And she asked, am I okay? Yeah, my allergies are acting up this morning. I don't know why I'm a little bit more stuffy than usual. My voice isn't this nasally normally, but it's just because the allergies are kicking up. The weather's getting warmer. Apologies for that. It should clear up as we go, but yeah, it's just my allergies today. In fact, I blow my nose, it's a little better. But let's move on. Atari Controller, the oldest of the old school on this list, because I don't see like a C64 or some of the really old systems, like ColecoVision or anything like that on here. I'm going to put Atari in lower B tier. I did see that Naked Snake says Atari Controller D tier. I disagree, because the Atari Controller, for its function, having used one, is fine. It's older tech, but it's more simple, and it does what it needs to do for the system. If we're comparing all these purely based on the advancement of technology, then it would be like a most recent to oldest tier list. That's not the point here. We're looking at function and a little bit with design, but overall ease of use, and does it do what it needs to do, and is it easy to implement for games. And Atari is such a simple system that its controller did what it needed to do. The paddles, which were another type of controller, I did not like. Those would go much lower. But we'll put this one here. It's probably going to get pushed further down, but for the time and for its abilities and its use, the Atari controller was fine. Naked Snake says, I don't know, Raku. The game controller is still being used to this day. Well, yeah, that sort of illustrates my point of function of hardware and use versus just age of tech. Again, if we were going by just age of tech, then GameCube controller would be near the bottom because it's one of the older ones compared to some of these other ones. But that's not how we're ranking. So we'll sort of apply those constraints to everything going forward. And let's see. Penguin mentioned Sega Saturn controller. Is that what this is? I was going to look that up. Yes. Thank you, Penguin. I had to look it up to verify. But speaking of Sega, this is the Genesis controller. I know the Genesis had a couple. It's a 3-button configuration. Yeah, I'm used to seeing the one that was kind of more... Actually, no, this is a 6-button Genesis controller. Yeah, this one right here is I think it's the default. It's got that sort of crescent half moon shape. 3 buttons, regular D-pad. This one was fine. I'm putting this one up here on... I'm going to put it up higher. Genesis controller was solid. I had no issue with it. Snake says, where's the Jaguar controller? This isn't an all-inclusive list. It seems like it's the major players, because I don't see TurboGrafx 16 on here. I don't see CDI. CDI had that really horrible, like, remote-looking one, I think. There's a bunch. It seems like it's the major consoles. Which is interesting, but that makes it a little bit easier because then we don't have a million of these to rank. But yeah, Genesis will go up here in upper B. Saturn was okay. I never owned a Saturn, but I played on one a little bit. Penguin says, I know my game history. I'm the official Nintendo representative for the Prince, after all. That's true. Penguin does have a lot of really informed opinions on things going back in gaming history. I could see Naked Snake does not have a high opinion of number pad controllers. That was one of the ones with those Atari paddles, I think. It had like a number board. Yeah, I wasn't a fan of those. I like the stick ones. And that's analog stick based ones better. The Sega Saturn we'll put on C tier. It was okay. The kind of curved controller, which I guess is their ergonomic design, it was alright. 6-button layout vertically is kind of weird. And I don't know if this one had shoulder buttons, but 6 on the face is kind of much. I like 4 kind of in the NES or Nintendo configuration. And this was a D-pad, no analog stick, I believe. Penguin says, TurboGrafx would be C tier for me. I did not like the D-pad at all. Was TurboGrafx the one that had like a recessed, kind of like a almost crater-shaped D-pad? Let's see. TurboGrafx 16 controller. The one I see on the default here, no, it's not really recessed. It's just sort of concave. But it looks like it doesn't. I don't know. The shape is kind of weird. I'd have to actually try it out to see. Very similar in design to the NES one, but it's circular. It's got a circular shape and a D-pad. Lion Tamer says, PS5 controller S tier. I would probably put the PS5, again, PS5 and Xbox One X aren't on here. This is probably done before they came out. I'd probably put the PS5 one either high A or low S. I'd have to see how the rest of these shake out. But yeah, it's a good controller. Solid. It's what I use for all of my PC stuff. I don't own a PS5, but I do have a controller, and it's the one I have is starting to get beat to hell because of God Hand. But looking at it right now, solid controller. Penguin says, the D-pad felt mushy when I used it, in reference to TurboGrafx, I think. That's fair. Lion says, the controller having adaptive triggers is what makes it S for me. Yeah, we'll get into the implementation of trigger button tech on some of these on the Dualshock series. But first, let's move on to the Dreamcast, the forgotten console. I don't like the Dreamcast controller. I'm going to put it on low C. It was functional, but just bulky. The VMU, which is the little screen in the middle, you could slot cartridges in, you get additional sort of features that utilize that, is kind of an innovative idea for the time. But the sort of bulky layout and the fact that the controller wire was at the bottom, that also really bugged me. I think literally every other one on this list that has a wired connection has it coming out the top. But in hand, the Dreamcast controller felt okay. It was just clunky. The button layout was fine, and it had, this is the analog up here in the corner and the D-pad. It was weird, but wasn't terrible. Just a little bit kind of bulky to use. Naked Snake says, I was about to slap you if you put the Dreamcast controller in D tier. It wasn't painful to hold. It was just kind of awkward and big. So, again, not my favorite, but mostly by design and functionality. Now you want a D rank controller. The original Xbox. Original Xbox controller, the Duke, that massive round controller, is garbage. I did not like this one at all. Maybe I have little tiny baby hands, but this one was not comfortable. It was clunky and big, like the Dreamcast, but for me, the layout of the analog sticks below the buttons, in addition to its size, meant it was not comfortable to hold. And I think that was partly driven by the fact that I really like the PS2 line, and going from like a DualShock 1 or even a DualShock 2 to one of these was not comfortable. I'm assuming Snake is a fan of this one, because Snake says, "That's it, Raku, you've drawn the line. I challenge you to Mortal Kombat in real life." Well, that's not likely, but you'll have to hold those feelings of hostility till we get Fight Club going, Snake. I've honestly never heard anybody defend this one, so your opinion's interesting to me. Maybe it's, again, hand size, but for ergonomic layout, I think it's because of the placement of the sticks and because it's so big. I did not like using this one. For some reason, because you're only up on the sides for the Dreamcast, I think that's what made it easier, because you don't really have to stretch to get to analog sticks versus this one, the analog sticks being so much lower. Penguin says, agreed with the Duke. I have big hands and using it felt awful. Snake says, that was my first video game controller. Hey man, there's nothing wrong with that. If you like it, then that's perfectly valid. That's perfectly valid, Victorian. Now, they made an original Xbox Series S controller, I think it was called, that was a lot like the 360 controller down here. And that one was much, much better. Much better. I remember using that one and thinking, wow, that's such a more compact and ergonomically designed controller. If they launched with that, probably would have been better for the system. But yeah, the Duke was, I don't know what they put into it that made it so big. Like, the big button in the middle wasn't an actual clickable button, was it? Maybe Snake can confirm if he had one. But it had this big Xbox logo here. Actually, maybe we can look it up. Original Xbox controller. I could be wrong, but I thought the original Duke controller it wasn't clickable. It was just a logo. I could be wrong. But yeah, that controller S version was more slimmed down. It was shaped more like the controllers we'll see down here in the 360. But yeah, interesting debut for hardware tech. Okay, Snake says it's not a button, it was just a logo. Okay, that further cements my opinion here. I don't know what type of mechanical stuff they put in there for this one, but the fact that there's that giant thing that takes up like 20% of the entire controller and it doesn't do anything, that's not good design. It looks interesting, but from a functionality standpoint, there's no need. And the fact that they scaled it down and slimmed it with the S version just sort of reinforces that. But yeah, I did not like that controller. But we move on to the 360. The beast of a controller that really evolved in a lot of ways from the original Xbox. And I played a lot of 360. In fact, of that era, even though I did have a PS3, which I got later, I played majority of my stuff on 360. This controller is solid. It's really good. I'm putting it up on S tier. I have zero complaints about the 360's controller. Maybe not having 2 analog sticks would be one complaint, I guess, but it's minor. It doesn't affect anything. Not enough to drop it down a tier. Let's see, Xbox. I want to see something. This screenshot's a little bit hard to see. I guess one minor complaint I have is that the analog sticks are in weird spots. Like, to me personally, if it was 2 analog sticks at the bottom and a D-pad on the side, it would have been more symmetrical and kind of more natural. But again, it didn't affect anything with the games. Even though it was in a weird orientation, it was fine. It didn't bug me. I'm kind of a stickler for symmetry, but it's not significant enough to affect the rating. Really good controller. Really functional, wireless. Didn't have issues with it dropping connections. It's well implemented. Very good controller. Lion says, I personally put all Xbox controllers at high C tier or low B for the fact of needing batteries for the wireless ones. Yeah, that kind of sucks, but I do like that things like the 360 specifically had a rechargeable battery pack that came with the ones I got. Maybe it wasn't at launch, but it was just, you plug it in and you charge it. And it's like controllers nowadays. It's fine. I don't like that you would have to put batteries in it, but rechargeable things is fine. Let's see. Snake says, okay, I agree with you, Raku, on the S tier. Penguin says, in agreement, an uncontroversial opinion, 360 deserves S. I think we're all in agreement here. This one was fine. Or not fine, this one's very good. The Xbox One controller, which really isn't that different. It's very similar to the 360. It's got some additional features on its face, I think. Let me see. Xbox One controller. This one, I think the shoulder buttons were different on this one. It was fine, but I'm gonna put this one. I'm gonna put this one on B tier, in between the Switch and Wii U controllers. It was fine. I have an Xbox One. Pretty inoffensive, but I think I like the triggers on the 360 better. The bumpers and the triggers felt better to me, I think. I gotta go pull all my controllers off the shelf, but they're in another room. Let's see, Snake says Xbox One goes in low B tier. Penguin says, I honestly like batteries as an option. It can be useful when you want to power quickly. Yeah, I think if you have the option of slotting in a rechargeable pack or using batteries, it's all good. But when it's just batteries, that does blow. Thankfully, none of these do that, I think. Snake says, Xbox One you can use as a PC controller, but that's the later models now. I don't know if you could wire the original Xbox controller or Xbox One controller and put it in the PC, because I would have done that, and I had to buy a separate controller to use on my PC. But yeah, decent. But I think the 360 outshines the One. And I got no opinion on the Xbox One X, so if anyone owns that one and wants to chime in, feel free. Next up, we've got PS1. The Dualshock 1 controller, the first in Sony's line of controllers for their PlayStation systems. This one's fine. The original models didn't have analogs, and I think, let me look, PlayStation 1 controller analog. I want to say there was a version that added them later. Maybe not. Oh no, I see one here that's a silver version that has analogs. The original ones didn't. I would rank the original one upper C tier. The one with analog sticks would go up here on B tier, probably above the Atari. The first iteration of PlayStation controllers was fine. You didn't need analog for some of those earlier games. Again, perfectly fine, but would have been nice to have, especially as things went 3D. I would consider just kind of average for the base one, and the analog one would ranked a bit higher. Let's see. Snake says PlayStation controller A tier. The original PlayStation controller, I think, for me, is going to rank a little bit lower. Wazzy says I have a Nerf version of the PS1 controller, so you could throw it. Does that mean it was like cushioned? That's interesting. You'd think they would have designed that for all controllers as games got more difficult, so you could throw them. That's a neat idea. Gamer Rage controllers, right? Penguin says there were versions that did have analog sticks, which... Did you know that only one of the game library requires the use of analog? I don't know which one that is, but that doesn't surprise me. I think later titles had a toggle or an option to use analog, but the first iteration ones weren't coded to use it. So even if you had one, I don't think you could do anything with it. But yeah, PlayStation 1 controller was a good jump off point because that leads to the Dualshock 2, which is going up on S tier for me. I really like the Dualshock 2. That controller is well designed, very functional, and durable. I have talked to people who said that they broke theirs a lot, but I will tell you, having gone through two DualShock controllers when I played God Hand on PS2, and they got beat to hell. I've talked about it on the playthrough, they went from being springy on the analog sticks and having noticeably raised buttons to being flat buttons and squishy sticks, but they still worked. We went through two of them just because we wanted to get a little bit more precise control, but both controllers by the end were super worn and looked like they'd been through the war, but they worked fine. All the other games that we played them on, it was fine. But ergonomically, I had no complaints with the DualShock 2. A really solid controller. Maybe the D-pad could have been a little more designed to be like a central button instead of directionals, but never really bothered me. Just super comfortable controller. The button layout was fine. It was great. DualShock 2 is awesome. Lion Tamer says, I never understood what the analog button was for on PS2 controllers. Are you talking about the sticks? Or are you talking about the D-pad? And Penguin confirms there were options for later games. Analog controller came out within half the lifespan. Okay, yeah, so it could be used on like later half of the library, I imagine. Penguin says, PS2 is S tier. I love using that controller, especially for God of War. Yeah, it was an all-arounder, just really well-designed controller. I've never heard anybody complain about the PS2's DualShock. Now, PS3, I'm going to drop down a little bit to B tier. By design and function, it was almost identical to the PS2 controller, but I did not like the triggers on the PS3. They went from buttons, which I'm pretty sure was just straight up buttons on the PS2, to these weird springy triggers on the 3, and I did not like that. The feel on the trigger buttons on the PS3 is what drops it down for me. Oh, Penguin says analog button was for classic PS1 games to use analog controls. Okay, yeah, I believe what Snake's talking, or Lion Tamer's talking about is an actual toggle button that was to enable it on there. Which we can't see on this one, but on the screenshots of the upgraded PS1 controllers, a button in the middle between the two sticks. That's what turns on analog. But Wazzy says, the same damn controller. It's not. The PS3 and the PS2 controllers, the main difference is the trigger buttons, and that's what moves it down for me. I could go grab them and take a look. I wonder if where my PS4 controller went. That one was... I had to replace the PS5 because it was losing connection on my PC. But give me 1 second. I'll go grab my PS2 and PS3 controllers, and I can actually compare them here live. So give me 1 sec. I will go grab them. Alright, that didn't take long. Wazzy says, Raku Faktu has never held a controller in his life. He has crab hands. Well, if we're talking about playing on the PSP, when you have to use the claw grip, you'd be correct there. Alright. So, obviously you folks can't see because there's no live camera. But I'm looking at both controllers on my desk here. PS3 and PS2. So shape and layout wise, they're almost identical. In fact, I could put them on top of each other and the controller shape is the same. I think they took the exact same model mold and probably swapped the guts out since the PS3 was a wireless controller. There is a central button on the PS3 controller, kind of like a home button that's on everything nowadays. But feel-wise, it's fine. Buttons, face buttons, D-pad buttons. It looks like the PS3 is a little more textured on its D-pad buttons and analog sticks, kind of for more grip. But again, the triggers. I don't like the triggers on the PS3. The PS2 Dualshock, it's just buttons on R2 and L2. But the triggers on the PS3, you can hear me clicking them. What I didn't like about these, the springiness wasn't too big a deal, but it was easy for your fingers to slip off, especially if you had sweaty hands. And because they were so springy, if you're playing something with really precise controls and your fingers slipped off of those spring triggers, it would mess you up. And I had that big problem with that in God Hand on PS3. From other games like RPGs, probably didn't matter too much, but for action games, I feel like the spring triggers were a detriment. Interesting design, but they were also weirdly sensitive too. You could basically tap on them just a little bit and it would register as a full press in a lot of things, which also screwed me up on God Hand. I would have to take my fingers off of the triggers completely instead of just resting them, because if I would just rest them and then my hand would bounce just on my lap briefly, it would trigger an input and like I'd throw God Hand mode when I didn't want to. But other than that, it's perfectly fine. It's light. Wired and wireless was fine, but yeah. Not a fan of the triggers. They still have that more or less on the PS5 controller, and I don't know where my PS4 controller is at the moment, but if I look at the way they're designed on the PS5, what they did to keep people from slipping off, and I think this is a good idea, is they made them concave so that there's a little sort of lip and your finger can kind of rest on the lip and it's harder to slip off on the PS5. They're about the same in springiness, but just that contour design makes a huge difference. So yeah, a little bit of a sidebar, but I feel like it was worth comparing them side by side. Lion says, funny story, I bought a new PS4 controller for my birthday last year because my original one I had since 2015 was starting to drift. When I pressed the triggers and they immediately became useless. When Christmas came around, my dad hands me a PS5 as my present. Well, I guess if you ever need an extra PC controller, good. Walsey says to Penguin, just because I'm not good at games doesn't mean I don't know them. And Penguin says, I know I'm just taunting you for fun. Yep. It's all good. But let's move on. This is the DualShock 4. DualShock 4, I should have dug around for it just so I could compare the triggers. This one's going to be in line with the other ones, so I'm going to put the DualShock 4 a little bit higher than the DualShock 3. I'm going to put it higher than these Switch ones. I'm going to move it further up. I wouldn't rate it lower than the Xbox One controller. DualShock 4 is perfectly fine. Until mine started having issues connecting to my computer, which was like a power cord connection, not a button controller issue. It was perfectly fine. It still works wireless. It was just I have to plug stuff into my PC, and it was starting to lose connection. And can't have that for playing something like God Hand. The swipe thing on the middle of the screen, the contact pad, is fine. Interesting idea. I don't really use it too much, but serves its purpose. Next up, we've got another classic controller in the library, the original NES. I'm putting this one up on A tier, and people might fight me on this one. Depends on your background, I think. Penguin says, DualShock 4 is in B as well. Light is nothing but a gimmick, and the battery sucks on it. Yeah, see, I mostly played it wired, so I wouldn't know about battery life. But original NES controller, I really like. It's simple. It was well designed. It was super durable. I had never had one of these break ever. The placement of the buttons and layout was, again, simple, but perfectly fine. While it says no, boo, square hurts your hands. Are you talking about the D-pad? Some people I know had issues about the edges of the D-pad, like cutting into your thumb because it was like sharp edges. Oh, let's see. Waz, are you talking about just the rectangular layout of the whole thing and you're holding it? Yeah, I never had that problem. And I never had an issue with the D-pad. I don't know if it was the way some of them were manufactured, but again, I have little tiny baby hands, and I never had an issue with the ergonomics in holding the NES controller. It was fine. It was very comfortable. I think it's a much more significant step up from the original Famicom controllers. It's probably also because the original Famicom controllers were on like a 2-foot wire versus the NES ones had a longer wire. But yeah, I really like this one. Simple, but very functional. Super Nintendo, moving on to the 16-bit era, I'm putting up here on S tier. It's going to go into the 360 controller. I really like the Super Nintendo controller. This one, especially based on Wazzy's points about the comfort level, this one was easier to hold for sure, just because it was more rounded and kind of more ergonomically designed. But again, super durable. I still have my Super Nintendo controllers from back in the day. They are going out a little bit more on the D-pad. The D-pad isn't exactly the best because my brother and I played hundreds of hours of fighting games on those old SNES controllers, and we tried to get some third-party replacement ones that were recently on the market, and they just were garbage. I think unless you get the original run, like mint, which would probably cost you an arm and a leg, it's probably not going to be as good. The third-party ones look the same, but the buttons and the feel wasn't the same. We noticed immediately when we tried that. But they did a pretty faithful recreation of the hardware for the SNES Classic. I got no real complaints there. But yeah, really good controller. I like the button layout with the 4 buttons, the shoulder buttons, everything about it. It was solid. And it had a slightly more rounded design on the D-pad, so you didn't have the issue of it cutting your fingers, which I didn't, but overall, there's nothing I can really complain about with the SNES controller. It's super solid. Penguin says, Super Nintendo is my second favorite gaming controller. I love it, and it's my favorite way to play the original F-Zero and other games. Yeah, I feel like the original Super Nintendo controller covered all different types of things you could play. Very solid, well-designed. S tier. I doubt most people are gonna fight me on that. N64. N64. What are we gonna do with you? I don't like the N64 controller. Having owned an N64 late in its lifespan and playing pretty much nothing but Smash, really. I played the older games on it, but I mentioned before that one of my really good friends from Earth School and I played hundreds, without exaggerating, hundreds of hours of 64 Smash when Melee was out. I'm going to put it at the top of D tier. I do not think it's worse than the Duke just because it doesn't have bulky wasted space, but like it's been memed to death at this point. The design is just so weird. Sourlat says, you guys ever played 64 games? Oh, yeah. Like I said, Smash 64, GoldenEye, Perfect Dark. I played a little bit of Conker's Bad Fur Day. I played a decent amount of the big titles. I never bought a lot of the other ones. But the idea that you need 3 hands to play it effectively is just so weird to me. Like, you look at all these other ones where the analog sticks are placed at the edges of the controller so you could just slide your fingers to them. You can't do that with this one. You have to basically shift positions, which is why it's got the 3-prong handle. And none of the games required you to have access to all things at once, which further leads credence to the idea that it didn't have to do that. But it's just such a weird, inefficient design. And that's my gripe with it. It's inefficient. It's functional, but having to switch your hands around to different positions is bizarre. Interesting and ambitious idea, but it's not a good design in my opinion. These controllers work fairly durable though. We had our set of Smash controllers and we pounded the daylights out of them for years. And they never broke. So they were durable, but yeah. Can't really defend much there. Now we move on to the GameCube. GameCube controller has had a really interesting lifespan. Kind of like was mentioned earlier on in the stream, GameCube controller is still being used nowadays in Smash. It's a solid controller and plays very well for that game. That being said, its button layout is really kind of unusual and weird. I think compared to some of these other ones, it's going to rate higher, but I would put the GameCube controller at the top of B tier. And that might be a hot take for some people. I see Penguin says GameCube's my all-time favorite controller. Its function and design, and the fact that it's still being used in things like Smash, if I have a choice, I prefer to play Smash on a GameCube controller, something like this. So I definitely feel that. But its button layout is weird. I think the idea of a symmetrical layout like SNES, 360, PlayStation in general, and Xbox in general too, of having the buttons in an organized layout for the main face buttons is a really good idea. I don't like the fact that the 360, or GameCube rather, Has like one big button, one little button, two little buttons on the top, and a weird analog stick down here and a D-pad over here. Its layout I don't like. The feel of the controller and the ergonomics, fine. It feels great to hold. But its button layout is really funky and weird. The triggers had those kind of springy, squishy, depressed buttons at the top. Those were okay. Not my first choice for a controller. I prefer just regular button presses like bumpers or triggers. But yeah, what drops it down for me is just the button layout. When you have things like the 4-button layout, which is what you see on modern controllers, it's pretty intuitive, right? You have button 1, button 2, 3, and 4. For this one, trying to memorize which button is which is not intuitive at all. Maybe it is if you played a lot on the system, but yeah, I'm personally not a fan. Penguin says, now we're going to fight. Have fun with my riddle. Hey man, I never said you're going to agree with everything I said here on the stream. That's why it's the cancelable speedrun. But let's close the sucker out. Moving on to Wiimotes. Probably the more innovative controllers on the list here. I thought the Wiimote controls were fine, but for really precise games, it just depends on what you're playing. I'm going to put it on C tier, below PS1. Really neat idea, executed well. They never had connectivity issues, and for things like, Wii Sports and all the other type of motion control games, it worked fine. Just make sure you get a wrist strap so you don't put your controller through your TV. But for things like a fighting game, for example, as a big fighting game fan, Wiimote was garbage for fighting games. Kind of understandably so. You wouldn't really want to play a fighting game with that. But fortunately, the classic A or B, whatever it was called, fixed a lot of that with the Wii. So no real issues there. Penguin says, riddle me this. What looks stationary but isn't, can have spikes, can be both safe and deadly, and creates brand new holes when broken. Interesting riddle. Wazzy says stapler. That's a good guess. I was going to say a nail. Penguin says, also Wii is B tier for me. They're a bit gimmicky. Certain games are enhanced with motion controls, Punch-Out in particular. Yeah, again, games that focused around the Wii's motion controls and whatnot were perfectly fine and serviceable. But other games did not work well for the motion controls, so it was a bit less universal as far as function. But considering how unique of an idea it was executed well. Just didn't apply to every type of game. So that's why I'm putting it on C tier. Lion says, has anyone ever tried a mochi donut? I have not. That's an interesting idea. Is that just is it a fried piece of mochi? Or is it a donut made with mochi that's fried? Not necessarily the same thing. Sounds good. I'd be down. Okay. Closing this one out, we have the classic controller for the Wii. I'm putting this one up here on B tier. I actually like this one better than the later generation classic controllers that they made, just because it was very similar to the design of this SNES. Simple, easy to use. The bottom wire, again, not my favorite, but considering you wired into a Wiimote to play, perfectly fine. This was my preferred way to play Smash for a long time on the Wii, till I got a GameCube controller. And then it was GameCube all the way for Smash. But for other games, like the Virtual Console and other action games, the classic controller is perfectly fine. And good for fighting games, too. Penguin says, honestly, don't like mochi. Oh, that's a shame. Mochi's one of my favorite snacks to eat. You can do a lot with it. Saralad says, holding the remote and nunchuck was weird for me. Yeah, it just depends on what you're playing, I think. Penguin says, Wii Classic is okay. I agree at B tier. Okay. Well, this is the tier list. Again, not the most cancelable, I guess, but shoutouts and credits go to Shmorka on Twitter. Let me see if I can put this in the chat. If you folks want to make your own, then by all means. Especially if you passionately disagree with my takes here. Create your own and send it to me on Twitter. I'm always interested to see what people think when it comes to ranking stuff like this. So real quick, let me double check the link. I'll put it in chat here. And you folks can make your own. But now let's move on to the big one. The big elephant in the room. This is probably going to be the majority of our stream time today. Fighting games. Lots and lots of fighting games. More fighting games than most people probably know existed. But one of my favorite genres, probably my top 3 favorite genres, fighting games would be probably number 2. This one is very comprehensive. It doesn't have everything, since every single fighting game would probably be hundreds upon hundreds. But these are the big ones. Penguin says, I agree with everything except for GameCube. Naked Snake says, Raku get into fighting games. Yeah, I don't want to get sued by Wooly, so we'll say Raku ranks fighting games. Penguin says, one question, are you excited for the Capcom fighting game collection? Absolutely, Penguin. I was talking to Matt about that on the recent God Hand stream, but I am going to be picking that up, probably on PC and Switch. And maybe we can get some Fight Club stuff going with that too, because there's some classics on there. So we'll definitely look at it. We'll definitely take a look at the fighting game collection, because there's so much good stuff in there. But as you can see, there's a lot on here I haven't played. A lot of big ones too. Like Blaze Blue Cross Tag Battle. I haven't played that one. This is original Guilty Gear. Dragon Ball Fighters, across old and new. There's a lot I haven't played. And so I separated all that out, and I'm going to hide that tier to shrink down the scrolling here. But this is a really comprehensive list. It's got a lot. It's really neat. Let's see. Let me just hide. Oh, did it pull them all out? Oh, man. Could have sworn there was a... What if they took that out? There used to be a thing that said just hide rows. Well. Let's do this. I was hoping I could shrink this down so it's not so massive, but... oh boy, that undoes all the work I did before the stream to get stuff on here. Let's see if we can do this quick. A lot of these I've heard of but haven't played. Give me 1 second and I'll just sort of move stuff on here. Fatal Fury, original King of Fighters 2003. Penguin says, I love fighting games. One of my favorite genres, number 3 for me. Platformers and puzzles are above. Yeah, that's fair. Penguin says, same. I'm happy we're finally getting Dark Stalkers ports. Yeah, man. And there's some in that collection that have never been released in the West. It's really exciting to see that stuff coming out. So, yeah, we'll definitely be taking a look. All right. So many fighting games. I swear there was a way to just hide tiers, and they might have taken that out. That's fine. I'll do my best to scrub through the list, and then we'll just jump in. There's even a Digimon fighting game here, which I didn't even know existed till I started looking at this tier list. Marvel Superheroes versus Street Fighter. Street Fighter EX Plus. There's Grand Blue. Really wanted to get into Grand Blue Versus, but it didn't have rollback netcode. And I heard it played really garbage online. But it's a super neat looking game. Alright. Bear with me for a sec, folks. Yeah, Jump Force. There was a Kill la Kill fighting game? And a million King of Fighters. King of Fighters 2000, that's what that says. 2001. Yeah, a lot of King of Fighters too. Windjammers. Matt and I were talking about Windjammers. I want to look at that game, especially since Windjammers 2 is out. It's Power Stone. Project Justice. I don't remember which. I wish I could see the things on here. I've only played 2 Blaze Blues, so I think I've got 2 titles on here. Wazzy says, okay, gotta bounce. Skullgirls S tier or I riot. Penguin says, bye Wazzy, that's the one I need to play so badly. You should. Skullgirls is awesome. Bits is back. Welcome back, Bits. We are moving on to ranking fighting games. I'm just separating out the ones I've never played. I had it separated, and then when I deleted the tier, it just dumped everything back in here. So I'm going to do that again real quick. Samsho 2 and 3. There's a lot of those too. Street Fighter 5. Carmill's Revenge. Slap City. Original Street Fighter I've not played. Like most people, I've started with two and a million iterations of that. I haven't played Gem Fighter. I've played Puzzle Fighter. That's not really a fighting game. Let's see. Tekkens. I've only played a couple of the Tekkens. Tekken Tag Tournament 2. I think that's that one. Under Night in Birth. I've always wanted to try that. There's Tatsunoko, Godzilla, Kizuna Encounter, Blade Strangers, Yatagarasu. That was that independent fighting game. Looked really cool. Vanguard Princess. This is one of the Tekkens, I think. Virtua Fighter. Never gotten a Virtua Fighter. Waku Waku 7. Okay. I think we've got everything separated out. If I see any other ones, I will move them into the tier. But yeah, I wish I could have just hidden it, but I think they took that feature out because I can't do it now. If I just delete the tier, it'll dump it all back. And we don't want to do that. So we will start with the top. Soul Calibur 2. Soul Calibur 2 is one of my favorite fighting games. It got me into the Soul Calibur series. I played it in the arcade, and it still holds up incredibly well. So I'm going to put Soul Calibur 2 in S tier. That's where I got introduced to my main from Soul Calibur. The not disturbing at all Voldo. That's my main in Soul Calibur. Really good game. They released it in kind of like an HD version with online a few years ago. It's supposedly really good too. Let's see if that's on Steam. Next up, Bloody Roar. Bloody Roar is kind of a unique game. I'm going to put it on C tier. It was sort of a mix of like a Tekken-ish type game. Close range, string-based combos. Not really wrestling, but kind of wrestling-esque. But the main gimmick to Bloody Roar is all the characters had like a beast form. I think some people call it Furry Fighter, but characters could turn into like an animal form, like an anthro-animal form, which was kind of interesting. Like I think the main character's name is Yugo? It's Yugo, I think. He turns into like a wolf. He's on the cover. But it was unique. I wouldn't mind seeing Bloody Roar brought back to current gen and see what they do with it. I'd definitely play it. But it kind of an average game to me. Interesting premise and idea, and there's a whole bunch of them. I just played the first one. And bear with me here, because of the huge never played tier, I'm having to scroll back and forth. Injustice, Gods Among Us. This one's going to go on C tier as well. I played it a little bit. This is another Realm game, the Mortal Kombat folks. If you like the DC Universe stuff, it's pretty solid. It plays well. The characters are pretty diverse. The combat's not really for me, though. It's just kind of mid to me, but it's a good game. The second one I didn't see on the list here. Injustice 2. Which is weird. That one was even more well received than the first. But yeah, it's going on mid. Next up, Melty Blood Actress Again. I played Melty Blood Act Cadenza more, but that's not on the list. And Actress Again was kind of a port of that. I'm going to put this one up on B tier. Melty Blood is really cool. If I end up doing Fighting Game Month, I will most likely feature the latest version of Melty Blood since I really want to play it. I have it, but I haven't played it yet. It was based off of the novel series, Tsukihime. I know nothing about the characters, but I played a lot of Act Cadenza on PC, and it was not translated, so I couldn't read any of the stuff at the time. But it's a really solid 2D fighter. Very fun. Diverse cast. Really neat. Penguin says, I personally put Injustice in B. Prefer the second one. That one would be A for me. Yeah. I've heard the second one is more polished than the first and even better. I've never played it, so I couldn't rank it, even if it was on the list here. Alright. Next up. Vampire Savior. This one, I think, is the only Darkstalkers entry here, which is weird. There's a whole bunch. And I don't remember. Penguin, maybe you could tell me, since you know Darkstalkers a bit, which Darkstalkers this equates, if any, because the way they release those games in the West is weird. So I'm going to sort of roll all my opinions of Darkstalkers into this one entry because it's the only one on the list. But Darkstalkers is cool. It's a really, really neat series. like we were talking about earlier, bringing this one back in the Capcom Fighting Collection is going to be a great chance for people to just play a really old school two-dimensional Capcom fighter that's not, Street Fighter. But the cast of characters is very diverse. They're all like monsters and monster-esque type designs. Obviously, the most famous one that people probably know is Morrigan. She's a succubus? Yeah, I'm pretty sure she's a succubus. Morrigan comes from Darkstalkers. Felicia, the cat girl, she also comes from Darkstalkers. Xianko, or I think Lele is her Japanese name. The Chinese ghost girl, she comes from Darkstalkers. It's really neat. The design and aesthetic of that game is cool. I'd love to see them bring it back. So for those that like Darkstalkers, buy the Fighting Collection and show Capcom people still care. I bought the Darkstalkers collection on PSP and played it for a bit. Penguin says, Vampire Savior is the first one, I believe. 3 is my favorite, personally. I put that one in C because the main mechanics were better in the sequels. Yeah, we're going to roll them all into 1 just because there's nothing else here. I think I played 2 or 3 in the arcade. Because I spent most of my time playing Darkstalkers in the arcade back in the day. I don't remember who I mained in that game, though. Maybe Jonathan Talbane, the werewolf? Either way, it's such a cool series. Next up, this is Blaze Blue. Which one is this? I think I need to take this one off. This is Continuum Shift? I can't read the text at the bottom. I gotta look up the logo. I played 2 of them. Calamity Trigger, which is the first one, and then Continuum Shift is the second one, I think. Boy. Let me look it up real quick. Blaze Blue. Maybe Snake knows. I know Snake's played some of these games. Okay, this one, that doesn't help me. Continuum Shift to Extend. Boy, Arc System Works likes making weird titles for their games. It makes it hard to figure out which is which. Let's see. Okay, Continuum Shift. I'm going to treat this one as Continuum Shift down here. It was the second one. Blaze Blue, the second one. Blaze Blue, the first one. Blaze Blue, the second one. The one I just put up here is like a re-released version of the second one. I don't know. You could devote an entire separate tier list to just every iteration of every Arc Sys fighting game. And I love Arc Sys, but boy, is it confusing to figure out which one is which. Penguin says, Morrigan is my favorite character. I find her extremely funny. Yeah, I think that's valid. I don't think her humor is what most people find appealing about her, but she's really interesting. The Darkstalkers cast is pretty diverse. Did you ever watch the anime back in the day? Penguin says, my arcade had both, but I played 3 mostly on my PS3. I see. I think I played 3 in the collection more than anything else. Alright. Let us move on. Super Smash Bros. Melee. I am going to get crucified for this one. This one is going at the bottom of C tier, because I don't like Melee. But hear me out on this one, folks, before you nail me to the wall. I never got into Melee when it was released, because I didn't have a GameCube. And I played the original Smash 64 way beyond its lifespan up until Brawl came out. And as a result, I'm used to playing the more old school, slower paced Smash, so I couldn't get into Melee. I'm not saying it's a bad game, I just don't like it personally. Competitively, I think Melee's the best Smash Brothers game for competition. Maybe that one in Ultimate now, but again, I played primarily the old school one. And so I've gotten in a lot of arguments with people over this one. It's fine if you think Melee is the best Smash game. It's good. But me personally, don't know why this got deleted. It just wasn't for me. Penguin says, I know why people like Morgan. I honestly never cared for eye candy, and I've seen bits and pieces for the anime. The anime was kind of weird, but it wasn't bad. Oh, and Lion Ashley Kennedy's here. Hey, what's up, Lion Ashley Kennedy? I'm going to have to be careful since I don't know if Lion Tamer's still here, but I'll do my best not to get you mixed up. Penguin says, and agree on Melee. I think it's one of the most overrated games I've played. It just depends. If you're a competitive Smash player and that's why you like Melee, that's perfectly fine. It's a good game. It's not for me. This is a personal preference tier list more than anything else, I think. And I'm not saying that just to cover myself. I'm putting this primarily based on my experience and preferences. Because if you're talking about influential level on like the fighting game community, this would be a different tier list. Absolutely different. Lion Ashley Kennedy says, play Sleeping Dogs. I have not played Sleeping Dogs. I've heard of it. I've heard it's pretty interesting. But I have not played it personally. Moving on. We've got Nidhogg. Nidhogg is really neat. I'm going to put Nidhogg up here on B tier. Why is it... Where'd my label go? Oh, there it is. All right. If you've never heard of Nidhogg, it's a very old school styled game. And I'm talking like Atari type graphics in the original. It's basically single color, flat sprites on scrolling backgrounds. But it's basically a duel game. And by duel, I mean like you're fighting a duel with swords. And it's 1v1. And the point is to get all the way to the end of your end of the screen. And you're squaring off against someone and kind of like fencing and fighting with swords. It's super simple, but it's really fun. And by all rights, it's a fighting game because it's got so much meta to its mechanics. It's hard to describe, but it's definitely worth checking out. I'm sure it's dirt cheap on Steam. But yeah, Nidhogg is fun. Very unique design aesthetic. Let's see. Penguin says, I tried playing competition. It's fun, but I prefer to play Ultimate. Yeah, again, it just depends on what you want out of your Smash type game. I like the huge roster of Ultimate, and it's not quite as fast as Melee. Penguin says, it's not Melee, Nathaniel Bandy. Hey, Fancy Fancy's here. Fancy Fancy says, is Wazzy and Matt watching TRG Coliseum? I don't know what that is, so I couldn't tell you. If you clarify, then I might be able to answer your question better. Well, let's move on. We got a lot to get through here. Blaze Blue. I like Blaze Blue. I fell off of the series, but I liked what I played back in the day. Oh, Proton John's stream was what Fancy Fancy's saying. I don't know. I think Wazzy might be out at the moment. She was here earlier, but she might be out and about, so I don't know if they're watching Proton John's stream. You might have to ask her directly. But yeah, I played a lot of Blaze Blue 1 and 2. Very interesting game from Arc System Works, the Guilty Gear folks. I like the cast and the setting and the way the characters play. It was very different. Each character had their own sort of gimmick about them. Really fun game. The story got kind of confusing and I couldn't keep up with all the versions that were coming out. So that's why I fell off on Blaze Blue. But it's a really good fighting game. And cross tag battle is supposed to be also really fun since it pulls in other franchises. But yeah, I think I put Blaze Blue and its sequel. Where did its sequel go? Over here. That one I'd rate higher just because it fleshed out some mechanics. Penguin says, I'm going to be honest, I never played a Blaze Blue game. I know my arcade has recommended it to me. It's fun. It's pretty easy to get into and difficult to master like most fighting games, but like all the other ones, it's an investment, and there's a ton of lore. I need to go watch just a lore video because the story is pretty neat in Blaze Blue, but it's confusing. Next up, we got Skullgirls. Skullgirls Second Encore is the logo here, but we're going to make this just an all-inclusive title entry for Skullgirls. Skullgirls is going to go on S tier, below or above Soul Calibur 2. And I'm not just saying that because Wazzy said she'd yell at me. Skullgirls is one of my favorite fighting games of all time. I featured it on stream once before. If we get like a Fight Club type thing in the future going, I would like to feature Skullgirls. And honestly, unless the price has gone up dramatically, which I don't think it has, if people want to participate and they don't own it, then I'll probably just straight up buy it for some folks because Skullgirls is awesome. It's such a story development for how it got to where it is, but the fact that it's still being developed for now and new characters are coming out is just nuts. It's such an interesting game. The art style, the setting, the gameplay, it's really a love letter to a lot of fighting game stuff. The guy who worked on most of the original cast in Kombat, Mike Z, was well known in the fighting game community, very knowledgeable, very proficient guy when it comes to fighting games. Turns out he was a giant scumbag and treated his people like garbage and was kind of a horrible human being, which is why his original company that was holding the rights no longer owns Skullgirls. It was taken by the publisher, and now they're developing for it. But all that stuff aside, the art and everything else in the game, it's fantastic. It's such a cool game. I cannot recommend it enough. And it plays well online with rollback netcode. And again, Skullgirls community is very dedicated. It's a little bit difficult to just jump into if you want to play competitively because you'll get murdered pretty hard. But it's got so much to offer when it comes to a fighting game. That's why it ranks so high for me. You folks can't see it, but I'm looking at the wall in my room, which is just top to bottom Skullgirls posters that I've got from events and whatnot. It is one of my all-time favorite fighting games, and it's worth looking at. Penguin said, I want to play Skullgirls so badly. Oh, I can look it up right now, in fact. I know there was a Humble Bundle deal for it, but if I look it up right now, just out of curiosity, Skullgirls Second Encore, $25. And there is a Seasons Pass for their upcoming DLC characters you can buy separately. Honestly, the game plus its Season Pass equals the price of one AAA title, which is mind-boggling to me. There's so much content in Skullgirls between its story mode and everything to learn from the cast. You would get your money's worth. And I'm not trying to just shill so people go out and buy it. I'm sure if other folks that have played it would agree that it's a really solid game. Even if you don't get the character pass on the outset, $25 for a fighting game with all the content that's in it is a lot. You could occupy quite a bit of time with just the base game that you get. And then if you really like it, you can get the other characters later. But yeah. Skullgirls Second Encore. Now available on Steam and other consoles too. It's everywhere. Worth a look. Penguin says, not bad. I may make that my next game purchase, but I need to finish Persona 5 Strikers and the other Kingdom Heart game I own. Well, Persona 4 Arena Ultimax is coming out next month, very soon. So if you want to be able to jump in on the stuff that we're going to be doing between Wazzy and my channels here, you could wait for that one. But it largely depends on what you want, because I will show almost as hard for Ultimax as I will for Skullgirls. Maybe a little less hard, but yeah, plenty of options. Plenty of options. It's a matter of priority. Alright, Mortal Kombat Trilogy. 1, 2, and 3. Pretty good games. I'm going to put them down here in B tier. Played a lot of the original Mortal Kombat 3 on SNES with my brother back on Homeworld. Mortal Kombat 1 was pretty instrumental in changing the landscape for fighting games. No one's going to deny that. Mortal Kombat 2, also really good, and 3 sort of built on that. Ultimate Mortal Kombat is not on here. That's the version that I wanted to own way back in the day, but I was never able to get a copy of. Penguin says, Persona games I want to play more of? Well, that's always a good thing. Persona 4 Arena Ultimax is the fighting game, though. That's why I mentioned it. We're trying to get a Fight Club thing established because a lot of people want to play it. But it's really kind of unique, and I'll be doing some stuff with it to show people what the game looks like and how it plays. But it's kind of like a Jojo fighting game. You have two-dimensional Arc System Works combat, but all the characters can summon a persona with the exception of a couple. And the personas come on screen and they can do different things like a Jojo stand type effect. Then that's the one down here. I don't see the original Persona 4 Arena. It's just Ultimax, so I'm going to rank this one as just Ultimax. Oh, here's Ultimate Mortal Kombat. Yeah, that would rate a little bit higher, but yeah. Trilogy, solid games. Super Smash Brothers, the original 64. That's going up on A tier for me. Again, I played so much Smash Brothers back in the day. Pretty instrumental in changing what people thought was a quote-unquote fighting game. And we're not having that debate here, but to me, Smash Brothers sort of created its own genre, but I consider it a fighting game. Penguin says, also MK Trilogy is A tier for me. I love 3 and introduced Stryker, my all-time favorite character. Ah, that's right. I remember you mentioning that you liked Stryker. There's nothing wrong with that. We'll get to Ultimate Mortal Kombat further down. That's kind of like the Everyone Is Here version. Penguin says, isn't that the logo for Wii U and 3DS? Is this... This isn't Brawl, I don't think. Let me look. I think you're right. This is Smash 64 down here. This is the Wii... The Brawl version. I'll put that one here on B tier. Technically... no, maybe it's Smash 4. These logos are not clear. They should be more clear. Here's original. Where's Brawl? I know I saw it. Well, there's Brawlhalla. Tobal 2. Some other things I need to take off the list that I haven't played. Alright, to the Googles. Let's figure out which one of these is which. Smash Brothers. Okay, yeah, Brawl is the one that has like the thing underneath it that says Brawl. It's kind of like a Street Fighter logo. Is that one not even on here? Yeah, I think Penguin's right. The logo that we're looking at... Where is it? Where'd it go? That logo was for the... That's technically Smash 4. Where did I put it? Oh, let me scan through the list here and figure out where I dragged. I should just left it where it was. Here's Ultimate. Yeah, there's no brawl. That's weird. Unless it was one of those other meme images, I just don't know the reference. Alright, if I see it, I'll drag it up into B tier. Smash 4 was fine. I didn't play that one a ton, but I remember... Oh, it's right here. Yeah, I'm going to leave it where it's at. It's fine. I'd rate Ultimate much higher. Penguin says that's Brawl's logo. Not as missing. Yeah, okay, that's fine. I don't think all the titles are on here for some weird reason. But that's alright. We'll continue to move through the list here. Blaze Blue Continuum Shift, the sequel. Rating that one higher than the original. Makes me wonder if they're ever going to do a Blaze Blue collection, or if another version of the game is ever going to come out. ArcSys is pretty busy with Guilty Gear right now, and I think they're doing something with Dragon Ball FighterZ. So we'll have to see. They have their hands in a lot of properties with their fighting games right now, which is good. They turn out good products. Penguin says, Ultimate is S tier for me. I love the roster and how it handles certain mechanics like Rage. Yeah, I'd rate Ultimate pretty high. It's a good game. But now we got Marvel vs. Capcom 2. Ooh, this one's gonna be a bit tough for me to rank. I'm gonna put this one up on A tier. I played a lot of Marvel vs. Capcom 2 in the arcades. It's a really fun game and a timeless classic in the library of Capcom titles. I didn't get super into the competitive aspect of it just because I didn't have the time to invest in getting really good, but it's solid. I would say it's worth playing if you ever get a chance to pick it up on some platform where it still exists. I don't know if you can get it now because they had the whole issue with rights in Marvel vs. Capcom 2 and 3 and Infinite, I think. And so you might not be able to pick this one up anymore. But if you can play it via arcade emulator or something, it's worth it. It's a super fun game. The first one was also good, but I played Marvel vs. Capcom 2 a lot more. Really fun game. Mr. Dirtbone says, Hi Raku, just got back from 5 nights. Assuming that's like a Five Nights at Freddy's thing. Either way, welcome, Mr. Dirtbones. Welcome to the chill stream, where we get canceled over our opinions. This time, it's fighting games. Penguin says, MVC2 for me is S for me, so much fun. Yeah, I agree, Penguin. It's a good game. It's physical, available on Dreamcast and PS2. Yeah, it must be the online stores where they pulled it. And, Mr. Dirtbones clarifies it's an RPG. I gotcha. And Penguin says I played the first MVC. It was alright. Yeah, it's fine. I just like 2 better. It's a lot more polished and there's a more diverse roster. Really fun games. Alright, next up is Dissidia, Final Fantasy. I cannot tell from this logo if this is supposed to be the first one, so I'm just going to assume it is and rank it accordingly. Dissidia is a really good fighting game. A very unusual, unorthodox fighting game, I might add. I'm going to put original down here. I played this one on PSP. It's such a unique concept for a fighting game and involving Final Fantasy characters. It was fun. I played original on PSP quite a bit. I played the second one more, so the second one's going to rank higher. But if you ever get a chance to play the Dissidia series, I haven't played their latest iteration because the way it was released was kind of weird and never got around to it. But it's very unique. Its fighting game systems and everything is unusual, but very fun. So I got to hand it to Square Enix for taking a stab at something kind of more unusual and out of their wheelhouse. and nailing its execution pretty well. Definitely worth checking out. And I should take a look at the more recent things. I think there's a mobile like RPG based in Dissidia, but it's the fighting games that we're looking at here, so we'll keep that there for now. Next up, Castlevania Judgment, one of the few fighting games on the Wii, original Wii, not Wii U. And Castlevania Judgment is kinda garbage, but it's entertaining garbage. It doesn't play badly, but it's not a great fighting game by any means. The character designs are pretty interesting. If you want to see like stripper versions of the Belmonts, this is the one I was talking to Matt about, where the character design and everything in Judgment was designed by the guy who draws Death Note. And so it's just kind of an unusual take on a lot of the characters compared to the more historic designs of the cast and other things. But it's clunky. Like, its combat and the way it's implemented is kind of weird. But it's kind of worth checking out just as a spectacle type thing. And there's never been another fighting game with the Castlevania properties. And I worry that Judgment killed that possibility because it was not very good. But it's kind of like a guilty pleasure thing. It's, if you find a way to play it and look at it, it's pretty funny. Like, to give you an example, let me see if I can pull it up here. Castlevania Judgment. We'll do a little bit of an aside here. This is Simon Belmont. His Japanese name is Shimon Belmondo. That is a really interesting interpretation of Simon of classic Castlevania lore. Very different from like his Smash iteration, the old games. Just again, I don't dislike it, but it's very different. Let's see if I can get. Oh, I wish this was a bigger picture. Here's a good example. This is Carmilla. That is definitely a design. Oh, you guys can't see it. Hold on. Let me, it's because I'm zoomed in. Let's see. In fact, you might not be able to see the other one, too. Sorry it was cut off. I didn't realize that. Let me see if I can zoom out. It's because I'm using Google Images here. Let me see if I could just view this. There we go. There we go. This is Simon Belmont. Again, interesting design. He must be very cold. Where's Carmilla? Here's Carmilla. I don't know why her head's cut off in the window there, but maybe this one's easier to see. There we go. Evil stripper with sword boots? I don't know, man. The design is very weird. Castlevania Judgment's got interesting artwork. Look it up on your own time if you want to see. But yeah, it's a good janky game, but very interesting entry in the roster of fighting games. Penguin says, one question. What's the worst fighting game you played? Mine's Sonic the Fighter and this one MK ripoff. That's a good question. Sonic the Fighter I've heard is pretty bad. And MK ripoffs, there was a million of them. Like, I've never played Tattoo Fighters. That one was pretty bad. That I've personally played. Well, let's look at the list. Most of the stuff on here that I've played, I think pretty highly of. Time Killers wasn't too good. That's not on the list here. That's kind of a more obscure game. Yeah, I don't know if I have an easy answer to that, Penguin, because most of the stuff I've played on here I like. So it's kind of tough to answer. Actually, no, I have an answer to that. The worst fighting game I've ever played, and it's a technical reason as opposed to an actual quality reason, was Street Fighter Alpha 2 on SNES. I believe it was Alpha 2, not Alpha 1. And it's because of all the things that would be a limitation on a Super Nintendo fighting game, it had load times. That's inexcusable. And my only rationale for why that happened is it was like an arcade port that was done super poorly. Because you start a match, on Super Nintendo, mind you, it loads. You go and select a character, it loads. It was horrible. My brother and I played it back in the day, and it was just god-awful. See, Penguin says, and I thought Super Castlevania design was weird. Yeah. But yeah, if I were to pick a worst fighting game title, it'd be purely based on the technical implementations for Street Fighter Alpha 2. But let's move on. Move on to Virtual On. I never really thought of this one as a fighting game, but now that I think about it, it makes sense. Virtual On is a cool property. This was a 3D sort of arena fighter. I'm going to put this one on B tier, above MK Trilogy. I remember playing Virtual On in the game, or not in the game, the arcades, and it had like a whole cabinet housing thing that you actually sit in, kind of like a racing game, and it had these control throttles that you use, and you have your own screen, and you play in an arena with other people, and it's robots. It's mecha robots flying around. You could do like aerial things and shoot at people, kind of like Armored Core, now that I think about it. But Armored Core is not a fighting game. But yeah, Virtual On is sweet. I'd love to see them bring that back on modern consoles and do something with it. I don't know who owns the rights to it though. Maybe Sega? But yeah, that's a super neat game. Very unique. Next up, Soul Edge. The first entry in the Soul Calibur series, technically. Soul Edge was good. I played it a bit, not a ton, so I'm putting it at the bottom of B tier. It was very, very prototype Soul Calibur stuff before they sort of fleshed the series out. But a lot of the Soul Calibur cast we know today comes from Soul Edge, so it was kind of the genesis of the entire series. But good. Pretty unique for its time. I would say definitely above average on the list here. Street Fighter Alpha. This one I'm going to be rating based on the arcade version, because I did play the Alpha series in the arcades and on consoles. I'm going to put this one up on B tier. It introduced a lot of characters that have become mainstays in the Street Fighter series now. Played pretty well. Overall, I consider it above average. Next up, Capcom vs. SNK, Millennium Fighting 2000. This one's also pretty good. I'm going to put this one on B tier. Oh, I'm going to go above Street Fighter Alpha, actually. Capcom vs. SNK was a super cool property. We'll get to the sequel, which is one of my all-time favorite games, but the first one was good. It was such a interesting crossover of properties between things like Street Fighter and then the entire SNK library of titles like Fatal Fury, King of Fighters, Samurai Showdown. Really neat. Again, Capcom versus Collection. Do it. Release a versus collection. MVC, MVC2, X-Men vs. Street Fighter, Capcom vs. SNK, even SNK vs. Capcom, which I didn't really play too much, which was also pretty neat. Just do it. Release it on a modern system so all of us can play it. Give it some rollback netcode for online and you're gold. Next up, this is the Dissidia sequel. Dissidia 012, is it like Duodecim something? 012, what was the full title? I know it had a subtitle. Oh, yeah. It's not 012, it's called Dissidia Duodecim. Because Square Enix has some weird boner for unusual subtitles on their games. This one I played on PSP and on Vita. I still have it, in fact. Really good game. I'm putting this one up on A tier. It took the original Dissidia, which I'm treating this as the original Dissidia, and fleshed it out, added a whole bunch of new characters, and added to the story. It was very good. Super fun game. They should release it on like the PlayStation Classic Store or something so people can check it out. Penguin says, yes, SNK versus Capcom collection will be more likely, but Capcom versus collection is something I want. Yeah, it might come down to licensing and rights, but I'd love to see them combine all those old versus games into a collection that we can play. Kind of like they're doing with the fighting collection, but I get the feeling the versus titles, because of licensing, is different. Marvel vs. Capcom, as part of that's probably a pipe dream, because Capcom doesn't own the rights to those Marvel characters anymore. That's why those old titles were pulled. So we may never see that again. But Capcom versus SNK, hopefully we could see. Tatsunoko versus Capcom, that would be good to include. We'll get to that one. That one's later on the list too. But yeah, there's so much potential in those old games. And you have Marvel Superheroes versus Street Fighter. This one I played in the arcades a little, I believe. I might be thinking of X-Men versus Street Fighter, but this one's going to go on B tier. Again, solid entry. This might have been adapted for PlayStation now that I think about it. Let's see if I can find it. Superheroes versus Street Fighter. Okay, this was released as an arcade game. It was a sequel to X-Men versus Street Fighter. I see. Yeah, I played this one in the arcades. It's pretty fun. It's like the predecessor to the Marvel vs. Capcom stuff we would see later. Basically the stuff that came before that in the timeline. Penguin says, also funny story. I nearly beat all of Sonic the Fighters without knowing any input. I was just randomly inputting the whole time. It's a 2-button fighting game. Ah, yes, it's the button mash strategy. Usually a sign that a fighting game's not too well designed if you can just hit buttons randomly and still do well. Penguin says, X-Men vs. Street Fighter is fun, but later games are more polished. I agree. I agree. But they were fun in the arcades and pretty novel at the time. I remember people losing their minds over the fact that you can have like Wolverine fighting Ryu from Street Fighter. Overall, pretty good. Next up, Tekken 4. I've been on record saying that I'm not a fan of Tekken. I have played a few of the games, so I'm going to put Tekken 4 in C tier. I think it was Tekken 4. I watched my friend try and beat the boss and get stuck on it for like 3 hours, but Tekken to me is just a series that it's not for me. I've played some of them, played more Tekken Tag than anything else, but I understand it's popular, and it's a good game. It's just the style's not for me. That's why I'm rating it lower. Next up, Rival Schools. Rival Schools was on... I played this one on Dreamcast. Another Capcom fighting property that's been kind of dormant forever. No one knows if it's ever going to come back. I know one of the characters was in Street Fighter V, the last season of DLC, I think. But Rival Schools is cool. Very different type of feel to a two-dimensional fighter compared to like your Street Fighters or your Street Fighter Alpha series. There's like a tag mechanic and this really cool air combo system. It was neat. We played a lot of Rival Schools. Kind of an underrated fighter in my opinion. Next up, we got Guilty Gear Strive, the latest iteration in Guilty Gear. A game I haven't been back to in a bit, but I will get back to it at some point. This game is really good, very polished. I'm going to put it up here on A tier. I didn't play Xrd. That's why Xrd, Revelator, and Rev 2 are in the didn't play category. But Strive is very polished. It's a good entry point into the Guilty Gear series. I haven't played the story mode or know anything about the lore, but in presentation, it's really good. It's a fun game. Still waiting for my boy Venom to come back, though. Maybe in DLC. Penguin says, Tekken 4 is one I own. It's fun, but I prefer 7. It's more polished. That makes sense. I know 7 is pretty popular. But we will move on. Marvel vs. Capcom, or excuse me, Capcom vs. SNK 2. One of the most ambitious crossovers ever. S tier. Going under Soul Calibur 2. Capcom vs. SNK 2 is a fantastic game. We played this one so much in Earth School with my friends. The roster was incredibly diverse and built upon the things that the first one down here introduced and just made it better. More polished, more stuff, just in general. Massive game. Capcom vs. SNK 2 is awesome. Incorporating things from the SNK properties like Samurai Showdown, people like Haomaru and Nakoruru. It was neat to see them in a big fighting game. You had Morrigan from Darkstalkers with her ancient Darkstalkers sprite that didn't get remastered for Capcom vs. SNK 2. Really good. Capcom CVS 2, Capcom vs. SNK 2, really solid title. Penguin says, Capcom needs to bring back its old IPs. I really want another Okami, Beautiful Joe, and Captain Commando. Well, I don't know who owns the rights for Okami and Beautiful Joe, since that was Clover, the same studio that made God Hand. They were dissolved, so I don't know if Capcom took over the rights. If they had, we would have seen re-released like HD ports of those titles now, I think. They may be sort of in licensing limbo, like God Hand, unfortunately. But yeah, all those properties. There's so many properties that Capcom's got in the background that they should bring back and do something with. I know I was talking to Sour Lad about Breath of Fire. Breath of Fire has been dead ever since they made that god-awful mobile game a couple years ago. Onimusha has been on the shelf for over a decade now, I think. Maybe a decade and change. There's just so many. Fighting game properties, Darkstalkers, other things like Dragon's Dogma. Yeah, who knows? We just have to wait and see. Penguin says, when I was living in California, my local pizza had a Samurai Showdown cabinet. Yeah, that's where I played it a lot too. It was a pizza joint near where I lived that also had a machine. It was a Neo Geo machine, and it had Samsho on it. Oh, okay, Penguin says, Platinum confirmed that Capcom does own the rights to Okami and Beautiful Joe. Well, ball's in their court then. We'll see if they end up doing anything. I guess it would make sense. We did see Amaterasu in Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Alright, let's move on. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. This is the Capcom 2D fighter that came out on a whole bunch of things back in the day and was re-released more recently. This isn't the 3D All-Star Battle one. I never played that, and that's further up in the list. But if you know anything about memes, and meme culture, then you may have seen all of the Dio memes with the steamroller that stem from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. It's a good game. It's really fun. I'm going to put it up here above Dissidia. I think it was released on a bunch of classic arcades collections in almost 360, I think, and maybe some other things. But it's fun. It's very stylish and pretty faithful to the JoJo series. It's all Part 3 Stardust Crusaders characters. And definitely worth checking out. Penguin says, my pizza place had that same machine, also a claw machine and a love tester. Ah, yes. The mainstays of classic arcade culture for folks who might be too young to remember. Back when you could go to a place and pay money to play video games. The fact that arcades aren't really a thing now makes me very sad. Granted, because of the pandemic, it's difficult, but maybe in the future. Penguin says, I know nothing about JoJo, but I've seen the memes everywhere. Yeah, that's pretty fair. I feel like that's the experience of a lot of people who don't read or watch JoJo, but spend time on the internet. Hey, Prince Lemon's here. Prince says, call me biased, but do I see Melee below Smash 4? Yes, Prince. Welcome to the stream, first and foremost. Good to see you here. I talked about it a bit before, and it's a matter of personal preference. I don't like Melee, so it's gonna rate low on my list because I don't play it, and I've never gotten into it. Like I said before, if people like Melee, it's fine. This is a personal preference tier list, not a overall game competency or game impact tier list. So that's why it's low. In fact, I haven't got there yet, but the original Smash Brothers is probably going to be higher than even 4. Brawl's not on the list for some weird reason. But for me personally, the original Smash Brothers is going to be pretty high up. But we move on. This next one is weird because, again, this is one entry, but it's not the only entry in the series, so I don't know how to really rank it. But Killer Instinct, one of my favorite fighting game properties of all time, but it's not the original, and it's not the newer one. Because the newer one doesn't have a separate entry on here, so I don't know how to rank this. It's weird. The original Killer Instinct, I would put on B tier. It's fun, and it's kind of janky, but it was such a different fighting game back in the day, and I played a lot of the Super Nintendo one with my brother. So the original KI would be high B tier. Probably higher than, maybe at the top of B tier. But I'm going to treat this as a sort of rolled in entry, and if we're including the new Killer Instinct, the one that came out in 2013, I think it was, it's going up here on A tier. If I do Fighting Game Month, I will be doing a dedicated stream to talk about this one, the new Killer Instinct specifically, because it's an awesome game. I would say one of my favorites to come out in the last 15 years. So fun, and if you're a fan of the original brand, there's so much to like in the new Killer Instinct. It's still active now. There's no more content for it, but people are still playing it. Penguin says, also Lemon, just to let you know, I'm doing my job as official Nintendo representative. I did not forget my role. That's true. Penguin is here as our Nintendo rep. Penguin says, I played the original KI. It's fun, but not my favorite. Prince Lemon says, Penguin putting in work as our honorary Nintendo rep. That's right. He did hit us with a riddle earlier that no one guessed the answer to. Feel free to post the answer and give us some clarification on that if you want, Penguin. Give me one sec. I'm going to go refill my water ball and take a momentary break before we burn through the Probably the rest of the list. We got a few, but a lot of talking points. So I'm going to go grab some more water, and then I'm back in one sec. All right. I have returned. I see we have a follow-up to the riddle. The answer was a starfish. Starfish can move, some have spikes, some are known to be deadly, some can be used in touch pools, and breaking a starfish creates a new starfish. I see. Our marine biology lesson with Penguin. Okay. Moving on. King of Fighters 13. King of Fighters 13 I played a bit. I didn't play a ton. But we'll put it up here on middle of B tier. Massive roster. Really, really fun game. Kind of the last era of 2D sprite-based King of Fighters. I didn't play 14, but 14 is when they moved to 3D. And then 15, the one that's out now, which I need to pick up. I want to play at some point. Is sort of an extension of the route they went in 14. I've heard good things about 15 too, so we'll see. King of Fighters games are known for their just massive roster of people across the Art of Fighting, Fatal Fury, and other SNK properties. So it's always cool to see what they throw into those big games. Next up, Soul Calibur 5. Oh boy, Soul Calibur 5. I ranted about this one a little bit on the God Hand stream. I'm going to put Soul Calibur 5 in high C tier. And a couple reasons on this one. Mechanically, as a Soul Calibur game, perfectly fine. The way it played and the improvements to the mechanics and everything they did from 4, perfectly fine. I can't remember the entire cast, but for most part, everyone was there, including my main Voldo, and that's what matters. But the story, I really didn't like. I've talked about how in this one they did sort of a forward time jump, and they took out a bunch of iconic characters from the series and replaced them with their children, or like these younger successor characters that were meant to be like the next generation. And so you had no Cassandra or Sophidia. You had Sophidia's kids, Patroclus and Pyrrha. You had no Keelik, but you had this young guy named Seba. You had no Taki, but this blonde ninja name, I think her name was Natsu. Story-wise, I didn't like. But the characters all played like they're either inspired predecessors or they're intact forms. Oh yeah, there's no Xianghua either. It was her daughter or something, but yeah, it was mostly story and the fact that it did not play well online that I didn't like about 5. Everything else about the game was fine. Played fine. Looked fine. Graphically, it was pretty good. Penguin says, I actually just bought Soul Calibur 5 and only played it once. Definitely worth $3. It's not a bad game. It just... It didn't really move the series forward in a way and turned a lot of people off. And by all rights, it should have just ended. I said on the God Hand stream, I'm surprised we got 6 because 5 should have just buried the brand forever. And 6 was a reboot. And even though I know Pink was there, and Pink said they didn't like 6, I think 6 is really good, so we're going to be putting that one high up. Penguin says, that's why I hadn't played it much. I don't like the kids. Yeah, and the story went a really weird place at the end. This kind of like, how can my sister be this cute type route. It was really weird and kind of off-putting. Penguin says MKX did the whole kid thing better. 100% agree. 100% agree. The introduction of like a successor generation was implemented way better in that, with people like Cassie Cage and Jackie Briggs. Much better. We'll get to MKX. It's on the list. But yeah, Soul Calibur 5, ultimately, not great, but not horrible. Penguin said, I like the gameplay, though. Yeah, 5's gameplay was fine. In fact, it was pretty good. Just everything built around it was kind of off-putting. Lion Tamer says, but can they beat Goku? Nobody can beat Goku unless it's heart disease. Next up, Ultimate Marvel 3, but no regular Marvel 3, interestingly enough. Alright, Ultimate Marvel 3 is a really good game. That's going up on A tier. I like Killer Instinct more. That's a personal preference. Ultimate Marvel 3 is probably the more impactful title in fighting games. This is a personal preference tier list again, but I played a lot of Ultimate too. And the fact that it included such a diverse cast of characters like Phoenix Wright from the Capcom franchises and one of my favorites, Firebrand from Demon's Crest. Very interesting. And the game had such a huge competitive lifespan, and people still play it. You can't get it anywhere, so if you own a copy, you gotta keep that thing close. But what most people consider the peak of the Marvel vs. series was definitely 3. And if you could find a way to play Ultimate, since the vanilla version's fine, but they added a lot more to the new one, Ultimate, I would say that's the version to play. Penguin says, you know SpongeBob can beat Goku, right? He survived the destruction of this entire universe. the next death battle, SpongeBob versus Goku. Penguin says, I've been needing to play 3. Well, we're going to get to the last one in the Marvel vs. Capcom series. And I would say if you like 2 and can find a way to play Ultimate, and play that one and then just call it good. We'll talk about Infinite. I got some opinions on that one. Penguin says, I've seen some available on eBay for a decent price new for Ultimate. That's pretty good. If you end up playing it, you have to let me know what you think. It's a good game. Next up, Street Fighter Alpha 2. I'm going off my arcade experience because if we were going based on my Super Nintendo experience, it would be an F tier. Alpha 2 was good. I'll put it up here on B tier. It fleshed out a lot of the stuff from Alpha 1 and added some new characters. My main in the Alpha was Rose, and I cannot remember which game she came from. Either way, it was a more refined version of the experience from 1. So yeah, it's going to go here. Good game. Next up, we've got another indie fighter. We've got Divekick. We will find a way to feature this one on Fight Clubs if we can do it. If not, then if I do Fighting Game Month, I'm definitely going to mention this one because Divekick is fun. This was created by Keats of Fighting Game Lore and Community. And Divekick is such a love letter to fighting games. I'm going to put this one up on B tier. It is deceptively simple but very fun to play. It's a 2-button fighter. And like literally 2 buttons. I think it's just dive and kick. A little hard to describe, but it's really fun. You can pick it up and figure it out. It does not have a high learning curve, but it's got a pretty complex meta. I found out about the Divekick campaign through the old Super Best Friends. They were able to get one of their characters in there too, the Baz, which is really funny. But yeah, Divekick is fun. I'd like to show that off on stream sometime. Ooh, now we have the original Marvel vs. Capcom. MVC1, I'm going to put a little further down on the list. I put it over here. I didn't play this one as much. I played 2 a lot more. But MVC1 kicked off the really big, ambitious Marvel vs. Capcom crossover, following on the heels of things like Superheroes vs. Street Fighter and X-Men vs. Street Fighter. It's a good game. Worth playing. I just like 2 better because I spent more time with it. Now, the end of the Marvel vs. Capcom series. Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. It really does hurt my soul to put this one on C tier because it's really not a bad game. But so much in the way it was implemented and rolled out was just such a disappointment. At its core, with a lot of people from the fighting game community having input into its mechanics, Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite plays really well. It's a pretty well designed fighting game. The problem is its presentation. Graphically, it doesn't look very good. It looks like an older gen game, and for when it came out, just its visual style and presentation turned a lot of people off. Its cast is middling as far as the draw. They went with a bunch of more obscure pulls and not a lot of fan favorites, which further turned people off. I think majority, if not all, of the X-Men are gone. Could have had something to do with licensing rights and whatnot, but overall, kind of a lackluster launch roster and not a very appealing art style really made it an uphill climb for MVCI. And I picked it on PC and played it for a bit and couldn't get into it. It plays fine, but it didn't hook me. Not like Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom or Ultimate 3 or regular 3 or 2. And it's really sad because Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite featured a Monster Hunter character, which was super fun, and I really liked that character, and that was it. None of the other casts I could get into. It was just such a kind of flaccid presentation that people couldn't get on board, and it died. And Capcom didn't really continue to support it and try and improve it or pull it out of its spiral, and it just died. And as a result, it was such a sad footnote at the end of the Marvel vs. Capcom legacy. Penguin says, thank you, Disney, for not letting X-Men be in any video game because you're salty or Fox is not selling the rights to you. Ah, I see. Penguin says that's why they weren't in the game. That makes sense. It's stupid, but it makes sense. A lot of things just went wrong for Infinite. It really isn't a bad game, but I don't put it high on my list here. I can't really call it D tier because it's still a competent game. It's just disappointing after everything that came before it. So it gets kind of a pity pass here. I really don't think anything's going to land in D tier. We'll see. After the peak that was Ultimate, especially competitively, seeing Infinite kind of crater was just all the more depressing. It's unfortunate. But now we move on. MKX. MKX is very good. I'm going to put MKX up on low A tier. I played this one a lot on Xbox One. I made the mistake of buying it on PC and had a really bad initial PC launch, and I couldn't play it and wasted my money. Was not happy about that. But Mortal Kombat X, or 10, technically, is a very well executed game. The Alien and Predator guest characters are some of my favorites in fighting games. And overall, like Penguin was saying up above in the chat, it did a good job of moving the universe forward and doing things like adding in the child characters but keeping the originals, and all in all, really fun. I played a lot of Mortal Kombat X. It's a good game. Now we got Persona 4 Arena Ultimax. Arc System Works sort of Guilty Gear inspired 2D fighter with Persona characters. Awesome game. Going up on S tier. I am super excited for the re-release of this next month. I'm hoping Atlas pulls their heads out of their rears and mods in rollback netcode, or allows them to mod it in so it can play better online, but we shall see. We're still ironing out the details, but we're trying to get a top secure fight club for Ultimax started, and we'll just see how well it functions. But yeah, I'm super excited for that next month. I'll be picking it up and featuring it on stream, and we'll see how the Fight Club stuff goes. Because Wazzy's been talking smack, and I can't let her get the best of me in a fighting game. Penguin says, that I agree with. My dad and I played it all the time. 9 is my favorite in the series, but X is fun. Yeah, 9 isn't on here, weirdly enough. I don't know why MK9's not here. It was really solid. It was one of the most competitive games in the fighting game scene for a while. So it's kind of surprising that it's not here. But I guess it is what it is. This isn't a complete list. But we will move on. Samurai Showdown 3. This one I played a bit, not a ton in the arcades. But I'm going to put it down here under MK Trilogy. It was good. I can't remember which one I played the most. It might have been 2. But for the SNK library of fighting games, Samsho is a pretty significant entry. And I still need to play the new one. That's why it's not on the list. I may pick it up at some point, as I've heard it's quite good. Samsho 2. We're going to put Samsho 2 a little bit higher. I think I played this one more than Alpha. Again, trying to remember what made the roster stand out, but overall just solid entries in the series. They kept moving it forward, making minor tweaks. On the topic of MKX, Penguin says it made Striker popular. Yeah, that's true. I think they made him a lot more of a defined character compared to the older games. But he wasn't in 11, I don't think. It's been a while since I played 11. But next up, let's rank the original Samsho. I'll put this one below the second one. I played the second one more, I know that. But like a feudal era Japan fighting game with a bunch of really interesting characters and character archetypes. Kind of established Samsho as a unique fighting game property, competing against things like Fatal Fury or King of Fighters and Street Fighter on the Capcom side. It's a good game. I really like the aesthetic and design. I played Haomaru in the old one. Actually, I think I played Genon more. Little green goblin man who I don't think ever came back. No, actually, no. I take that back. Genon was my second. Tam Tam was my main in Samsho. And he's in the new one. The giant demon mask Mayan dude. Alright. Moving on. We've got Soul Calibur 6, the recent entry in the series. I'm going to put Soul Calibur 6 up here on A tier. I really like this game. Again, understanding that some people have some issues with it that I've talked to. I've played this one a decent amount online with a friend of mine that was someone I knew from Earth School. Really good game. The character creator is very robust. The story, which is like a reboot of the original Soul Calibur story, is also pretty good. It kind of retcons everything in 5, thankfully. None of the characters, the child characters, are here. It's the original cast. And it's got some interesting crossovers. You have like Geralt from The Witcher, 2B from Nier Automata. And overall, it's very polished. It was much more polished than 5. Its online was functional. Didn't have rollback, and I don't know if it ever will. But very solid entry. I like this one more than 4 and 5, and 3 is debatable. We'll get there. But yeah, as far as good entries, if it goes out with 6, then the series could have gone out on a worse note. There were characters that we didn't see in 6 as dedicated roster entries, which was weird. I know one of Pink's gripes was not seeing Lizard Man, and I think Lizard Man was their main. And I do think that's a big critical omission, since Lizard Man's in the game. He was just never added as an official character. But other than that, there's not a whole lot that was missing. So, yeah, I'd rank Soul Calibur 6 very high. I like that game a lot. And let's see, on the topic of Striker, Penguin says he's not an 11. I haven't really played it, but so far I hate the story. And I do plan on buying the complete edition for my dad as a present because he wants to try it. But I like how it has RoboCop, and they did him well compared to Terminator. I don't think... Did I beat the entire story for 11? I can't remember. I played that one on Xbox One. One? Yeah, I think that's where I played 11. That's a good game. I honestly can't speak to the story because I forget, but it's a solid entry. I think people are still playing it now. It's got an active community. Alright, next up, Third Strike, Street Fighter 3. This is the only entry in Street Fighter 3 I've played. Played it a bit in the arcade and a bit on console. It's a really good game. I suck at it. I am really bad at Third Strike. But I'm going to put it up here under Melty Blood. This is largely considered one of the most popular competitive Street Fighter titles out there. And the fact that it's been re-released on so many different things is testament to that achievement. It's really good. It's also one of the hardest to get into. But I gotta respect it because I did play it a decent amount back in the day. And I played Necro in Third Strike. Good game. But if you want to get into it, get prepared for absolute merciless abuse by the community because everyone is super good. The only people playing Third Strike are the people who are really good at the game. But it's a solid entry. Next up, Soul Calibur 3. Soul Calibur 3, the long-awaited follow-up to the legendary title it was 2. Soul Calibur 3 was good. In fact, I'm putting it on... I'm going to have to put it up higher than 6. I played a lot of 3 when it came out. When I was in Earth School, I had sort of amassed a friend group that was really into Soul Calibur 2. My really good friend that I played 6 with recently, he and I kind of came up at the same time in Soul Calibur 2. I played Voldo, he played Xianghua. And so we had already established a lot of matches and like a rivalry. And we played a lot of Soul Calibur 3 when it came out. And we brought in our other friends to play it. Overall, it was a good time. Really solid entry and a lot of fun. We were so hyped when it came out, and it delivered. It was a really, really good follow-up. Maybe not quite at the bar of Soul Calibur 2, but that's an impossibly high bar. Penguin says, 11 story retcons almost everything from the comics X and 9. It takes place after X, though. It's a direct continuation, I believe. I haven't played them in forever, but a lot of the characters and everything from X goes in, like, progresses into 11, but I honestly don't remember. Penguin says, Third Strike may be my favorite. I suck at it, but I enjoyed it. I'm assuming that's Makoto. Makoto was your main? Well, that's pretty good. Makoto is pretty beastly. Close range in your face. Heavy hits. Alright, Soul Calibur Original. Original is going to go up here on A tier. I didn't play the original a ton. I played it in the arcades, and it was okay, if not janky. I played it a bit on Dreamcast, but not a ton. But Soul Calibur is the establishment of the entire series, so it's very noteworthy. Oh, I see. Penguin says, it's meant to be a continuation of the story in 10 or X, but retcons almost everything before it. Yeah. X was supposed to be a reboot, a complete reboot, so I think everything 9 and below, for the most part, I think is retconned. I don't remember. It's been forever since I played those games. But they seem to like rebooting the entire MK storyline every few games. Red Dragon says, is it only me and Penguin here at the moment? Looks like it. I honestly don't keep tabs on who's in the chat. I just see the numbers about how many people are on. But we've had people coming and going throughout the stream, which is fine. We're getting towards the end of the ranking here. We've got a few left, and then we'll be able to wrap up for today. But I know people have some really passionate opinions on fighting games, so they can always check the VOD out and then come yell at me at on Twitter. Alright, next up, Street Fighter 2 Turbo. I played a lot of this back in the day. I'm going to put this one... I didn't really play this competitively, though. Played it in the arcade a lot. I'm going to put it under Third Strike. Played it more than Alpha, that's for sure. But in the idea of moving the series forward, because we had Street Fighter 2, Street Fighter 2 Turbo, Super Street Fighter 2 on here. There's so many iterations of Street Fighter 2, it's nuts. It had the World Warriors, a lot. But Turbo was good. I liked the faster speed, and it added a new mechanic and depth to the gameplay. I was a Blanca main back in the day. Electric Monster Man. Penguin says, Red Dragon, yes, I believe. And Penguin says, the chat is mostly me. This shows why I may not be the best moderator, but I'm still open to the idea, though. That's fine. I've got some ideas for mod stuff. But, we shall see. Alright, here's Smash Brothers Original. This one is going up on A tier for me. The top of A tier. Like I mentioned before when we were having the debate about Melee and Smash 4 and Brawl, which again, Brawl's not on here, I played a ton of the original Smash on 64, way beyond its lifespan, because my friend group was really into the competitive side of just that. We played so much. I was a Samus main, and my friend that I played the most was... Who did he main? Falcon. Pretty sure he was a Captain Falcon main, so Samus versus Falcon over and over until like 3 in the morning. Lots of good memories with the original Smash. It's just the one that we gravitated towards and ended up playing more so than Melee. Penguin says, also, Rocco, do you still want me to send you that request? Yeah, go ahead, Penguin. It's fine. I'm still figuring out the other stuff, but you can go ahead and send it to me. It's all good. Penguin said, 64 is so much fun, and it introduced the Falcon Punch. That is true. We used to play... The way we would do matches in original, we would play the entire cast, and we would start with the entire cast mirror matches, and we would go like, I think Mario was the first as the poster boy, so it's Mario mirror matches, and we'd go all the way around the roster to the very end, picking the same character and then doing mirror matches and keeping track of who won, and then at the very end we would do our main matches. And so we, like I said, hundreds of hours of original Smash. Penguin says, I mained Falcon in 64 and Melee, Brawl 4 and Ultimate. I'm a GameCube watch. Or I'm a Game & Watch main. Oh, that's cool. I like Game & Watch a lot. Who did I main? Oh, I haven't played Ultimate in so long. I've got it on my Switch. I just haven't played it recently. I'm gonna have to think. I did main Duck Hunt in 4. I don't remember who I mained in Ultimate because it's been so long. Let me see if I pull up a picture of the roster, and it should inform my decision on who I main, or at least remind me of who I mained. Smash Bros. Ultimate roster. It wasn't Samus. I like playing Samus in Zero Suit, but it was a little bit more difficult compared to the older games, so she wasn't my main in Ultimate. Let's see. Launch characters. Game & Watch I played a lot. He was probably my secondary. Oh, I really wanted to main Ridley in Ultimate. He was probably my third. I liked Ridley a lot. Yeah, I think my main was still Duck Hunt. Same as Smash 4. Something about being able to manipulate projectiles and screen control and zoning was super fun with the dog, the duck and dog. I did like Bayo, even though she was kind of frowned upon for being kind of busted. She was fun. I played a lot of Diddy in Brawl. Just looking at the cast. Oh, Peach was probably my secondary in 4. I play a lot of Peach. Yeah. So yeah, I'd say probably the Duck and Dog were my mains in Ultimate. Let's see. Red Dragon said I've been busy sorting stuff out, but have the stream on in the background. I see. Well, hopefully our chatter and debate over fighting games has been interesting, Red Dragon. Penguin says the Princess server hates me for maining Game & Watch, but despite my Isabel with a passion. I've never played Isabel. She seems like she could be really annoying if you play her well. Penguin says, characters in Ultimate, Game & Watch was my main. Secondaries being Falcon, King K. Rool, Isabel being my joke character. Ah, so you bring Isabel in to troll people. I see. Alright. While we continue the debate and discussion, let's move on to Tekken Tag Tournament 2. It's a mouthful. I'm going to put this one on bottom of B tier. I enjoyed this one to some extent, but I still have a tough time getting into Tekken. I'm sure there'll be a new one coming out soon. Next up. This is a game I've been talking about a lot, but I've never shown off on stream. I will in the future. Probably for a fighting game month if I do it. Them's Fightin' Herds. This game I like a lot. This game is probably going to occupy the top of A tier. For those who might not know the history for Them's Fightin' Herds, this one was originally a My Little Pony Friendship is Magic fan game. And the group of developers that were making it had been showing off builds of the game, and they were almost finished with it. And right before they released the final product, Hasbro cease and desisted their project and killed the whole thing, which was really disappointing because I got to play a couple builds of the earlier versions and it was super fun. Even if you don't care about ponies in any capacity, the way they designed it was very much a nod to classic 2D fighting games, and they designed a really diverse cast of the main six. It was really well created and obviously a passion project. They weren't doing it for money. So to see all that hard work get torpedoed by Hasbro right at the end was super sad. And so they basically said, we can't work on it anymore. It was almost done, but the project is dead now. And the way the lore goes is right after they did that, everyone was really kind of sad and like, yeah, this huge project they're working on is gone. All that work. And then the original creator of the Friendship is Magic cartoon series, named Lauren Faust, who had worked on other classic cartoon properties in the past, she got in touch directly with the main six developers and said, hey, I heard that your project got cease and desisted. How would you like me to design some original characters for you to use and create your own game? And this all played out via Twitter, and everyone was really surprised. And they said, oh, wow, that's crazy. And so the devs got back together and they said, sure, we'd love to do that. We have to start over, but if you want to do that, maybe we can start something that's completely unique. It won't be a copyrighted property, and create our own fighting game. And so they did that. They started designing some characters and redesigning the infrastructure of the game from the ground up. And things started to materialize for a new property that was going to take the infrastructure that they created in Fighting is Magic was the fan game, and they started repurposing that for something unique using the designs from Lauren Faust. And she was hired on as a creative consultant, essentially, like a assistant producer type role. And so that was progressing, and they started releasing some ideas for things they wanted to do and started recoding, redesigning, reanimating everything. And at some point along the development, while that was happening, and they said, okay, we're going to be relaunching and rebranding this whole thing, and they started putting initial stuff out about what they were creating and the universe and everything. It was very neat. They said, we're sort of doing this on our own time now, but we want to keep pushing for it, and we're considering crowdfunding. And I don't remember the timing exactly, but while this new title was in development, the Skullgirls team, Lab Zero at the time, headed by the now disgraced Mike Z, they were funding the DLC for Skullgirls. They were on Indiegogo, I believe it was, not Kickstarter, and they were crowdfunding the first DLC character for Skullgirls, Squiggly. And their campaign was off and running while the main six development team were creating Them's Fightin' Herds. And at some point, Skullgirls added a stretch goal to their crowdfunding campaign, and they said, if we hit this crowdfunding goal, I think it was like 600K or something or other, they said, if we hit this crowdfunding stretch goal, we will give the Skullgirls engine to the main six people, and they can use it to develop their fighting game. And I remember immediately throwing more money at my backing for Skullgirls when I saw that, because I saw what they were doing on the animal fighting game, and they smashed their goal. They blew through that one, and so the Main Six development team got their hands on the fighting game engine that Skullgirls uses. I think it's the Z engine. And they were able to take everything that they were creating and purpose it into that engine instead of using, I think it was a custom fight game engine that was not as robust. And so in conjunction with that, I can't remember if it was before or after, I think it was before, the Main Six dev team announced their own Indiegogo campaign to crowdfund the development of them's fighting herds. And it was basically to create their finished product and get a functional product with the initial lineup of 6 characters that they wanted as a Steam title. And they were successful. I threw a decent amount of money at that campaign, and they were successfully funded, and the game was in early access for a bit. Its 1.0 iteration was last year or the year before, I can't remember. But so far, them's Fighting Herds has had the base version of the game release, the first iteration of story mode, I don't think second version is out yet, and their first DLC character. And I haven't been back to it in a bit, but I played a lot of them's Fighting Herds online. It includes rollback netcode and functions very well. Very well online, and features this neat kind of pixel sprite lobby system that they created. It's very endearing. But yeah, this game, reason why I'm talking about it for so long is because I really like it a lot, and it's such a neat story of an indie fighting game that was basically canned. The original genesis of the project was this thing that was a fan project and was killed at the starting line, essentially. And then through happenstance and good fortune, stuff came together to result in them creating something that ended up being much bigger than just a fan project. And it's people still call it the pony fighting game, which is kind of a misnomer because there's no ponies in it. There are no horses per se in them's Fighting Herds. They're all different types of animals, but it's fun, and it's pretty cheap too on Steam. We'll look at this one definitely. This might be the first thing in Fighting Game Month I show off, but it's very solid, and I'm interested to see where they go in the future. So yeah, that's my whole soapbox on that game. Very interesting story. Moving on, Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3. I'm putting this one above Trilogy. Where's Trilogy? Down here? Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 was kind of like the Everybody's Here version, like we see in Smash. It had a whole bunch of characters that were not in the original MK3. It sort of built on some of the mechanics. It wasn't too different, but it was a really solid game. I remember playing this one. It wasn't on Super Nintendo because I could never find a cart for it. It might have been on PlayStation. Or maybe 64? I don't remember, but it was good. Next up, Smash Brothers Ultimate. Smash Brothers Ultimate's going to go up on A tier. It's going to go a little bit further down. I'm going to put it under Marvel vs. Capcom 3. I think it's the most polished and definitive title in the series. If I knew people that played it, I'd play it more. But it's a good game. I like the huge roster. There's something for everybody there. Penguin says, one question. Do you consider Punch-Out a fighting game? No, I don't consider Punch-Out a fighting game. It's its own genre because you can't play it with another person, really. I don't know if the newer ones have that feature, but the main gameplay hooks of Punch-Out are you versus the computer, right? So I consider Punch-Out its own genre. Like the boxing genre, if you consider that its own class. Penguin says, I play it. Oh, if you're talking about Ultimate? Oh yeah, I know you've been on the Princess streams. This game doesn't run too great online, though. If Nintendo would just understand the internet and figure out how to implement things like rollback, then their games would be much more viable for things like Smash, but it doesn't play great online. It's okay. It's a shame too. All right, let's move on and start closing out the list of things here. Penguin says Punch-Out Wii does have multiplayer mode. It's okay at best. Okay. Yeah, it seems like that'd be difficult to pull off in like a versus type situation. But I hear you. All right, Soul Calibur 4. We're going to put Soul Calibur 4 on B tier. I played this one a lot. For some reason, it doesn't stand out in my mind as far as story and roster, but I had no issues with it. It didn't... To me, it wasn't quite as impactful as 3, and it didn't outright piss me off like 5. So 4 is going up here at the top of B tier. I played this one more than pretty much everything else on this list, by comparison. I don't have much to say about it, but it was good. If you like Star Wars characters, then the guest characters would have been something for you. Next up, Guilty Gear Double X. What's the version? Double X Reload? This is just going to be the all-encompassing entry for Guilty Gear and all its iterations, because there's a billion of them. Guilty Gear Double X. That's going to go on A tier for sure. I don't know if I can... I'll put it above Strive. I played this one more than Strive, but I'm not done with Strive yet. I will be playing it more. Penguin says, online for Ultimate does suck. Sakurai did confirm that he tried rollback, but it didn't go too well. That's a shame. I don't know if the way the input cataloging would work for rollback would apply to a Smash game, but I can't see how they couldn't find a way to make it work. But yeah, if Smash had better online, I'd probably play it more. Penguin says, unpopular opinion, I think Star Wars is overrated. Interesting. I don't think Star Wars... Well, I don't think Star Wars is overrated. I think it's overexposed. And to me, I think that's two different things. There are some people that live and breathe all Star Wars in all iterations. I think that there's been too much Star Wars since Disney took it over, and its overall impact was lessened as a result. I think as an overall property, Star Wars is not overrated to me, but because of how Disney's handled its implementation of the product, I think it's caused people to get tired of it. And we talked on the 2 God Hand streams ago, I think it was when Wazzy was on, we talked about how I don't think the new trilogy is as bad as people keep saying it is, but that's a matter of just opinion. I thought they were entertaining and interesting and felt like Star Wars. I didn't agree with all the narrative choices, but to me, I think between shuffling directors and some other, I think, Disney-influenced decisions, there were some things I would do differently. But I don't know if the series was left in Lucas's hands, if he would have done a better job, honestly. It just depends on what you really want out of a Star Wars product. Like, I watched The Mandalorian. I really liked The Mandalorian. I enjoyed the entire Mandalorian series more than the new trilogy. And I'm watching Boba Fett right now, and I'm enjoying that. So, it just depends on what aspect of the property you're looking at and what you want to get. And if people want to get on me for having a centrist point of view, that's fine. I enjoy the Star Wars content I consume, but I don't live and die by it. So it just depends. I can totally understand if people think it's overrated or overexposed, and that's probably Disney's fault. Penguin said, if Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl can do rollback on all platforms, then Smash can. Oh, no doubt. But it's Nintendo, and Nintendo doesn't understand the internet. So it kind of is what it is there. It's unfortunate. Next up, we got Tatsunoko vs. Capcom. This game is really good. It's one of the definitive titles on the Wii. I'm going to put it up here, kind of in the middle of B tier. I didn't play it a ton, but I remember playing this one with my brother a lot back in the day. And it's good. It's a really different sampling of properties that have been sort of slotted in under the Versus moniker for Capcom. And so I think it's definitely significant, but I don't know if we'll ever see that re-released anywhere. The licensing for Tatsunoko, I imagine, was really difficult. And I don't know if Capcom still has the rights. But we'll see. If they ever re-release Tatsunoko versus Capcom, I'd definitely pick it up. It's a fun game. Alright. Rounding out the tier list, we've got MK11. MK11 is going to go... we'll go up here on B tier. I think I like the roster a little bit more on X. Having Alien and Predator was definitely a nod, but MK11 continued to move things forward as far as gameplay, and the character designs and everything looked really good. They kind of got over their challenge at NetherRealm of drawing fugly face characters, and the presentation of 11 is really good. It's kind of tough for me to kind of put this one up against X. They're both good in my opinion. Solid games. I'm curious to see what NetherRealm does next. Penguin says, I respect your opinion. I never really liked it. I fell asleep during the original trilogy. I'm more Star Trek and Spaceballs person. Well, that's fair. No one is saying that everybody has to like Star Wars. If it's not your thing, it's not your thing. And that's perfectly fine. Spaceballs is kind of weird to put in that category because it's a parody. But I am 100% on board with the idea of supporting Spaceballs because it's one of my favorite movies. So no worries. Whatever you get out of your space-based science fiction, be it parody or another property, is perfectly fine. I never really got into Star Trek too much. The only series I watched a bit of was Next Generation. Yeah, I did like that. I just haven't seen the whole thing. Alright, Ultra Street Fighter 4. I played this one a bit, but not a ton. It's a good game. I'd say it was an iconic end to Street Fighter 4's run before 5 came out. So I'm going to put this one down here a little bit further. I'm going to put it above Jojo. Again, solidly designed. And well implemented. I didn't get too much into the competitive aspect because I suck at Street Fighter, but I did for a bit. It was pretty fun. Penguin says, that's what my grandma said. I told her that and she told me I'm not American. What, for not liking Star Wars? That's pretty harsh, but again, it's a matter of preference. You can not like something, and that's fine. Just because one person doesn't like a property doesn't mean it devalues the property for anybody else. Red Dragon says, well, I like Star Wars lore, but I find the movies, new and old, a little lacking. Yeah, again, it just depends on what you want. I do think the character and lore of the new trilogy in Star Wars could have been done better, but again, I put that on Disney and the fact that they had multiple directors. But I still found the new trilogy entertaining and interesting. So that's all I wanted to get out of it. I didn't expect it to be some sort of big capstone to the Star Wars universe like some people thought. So I could see why some people were disappointed, but if I don't feel like my time was wasted in front of a screen watching something and it feels faithful enough, then I'm usually good. Penguin confirms yes, as far as the Star Wars opinion. And Penguin says, if you think that's bad, you should have seen her reaction when I told her my religion. Oh boy. Well, yeah, you want to talk about things people react strongly to regardless of context. You know, everybody's different. And as long as people's choices aren't breaking the law or hurting anybody, then there's no problem agreeing to disagree. All right, let's rank these last two, and then we'll wrap up. X-Men Children of the Atom. Played this in the arcades a bit. Pretty fun. It's going to go a little bit further down here as far as compared to... Where's Marvel Superheroes? Yeah, I'm going to put it further down here. Again, instrumental in kind of setting up the fighting game aspect to pull in the Marvel properties. And overall functional. Pretty good. And likewise, X-Men versus Street Fighter. Let's see. We'll put this one under Superheroes versus Street Fighter. From what we were looking at the wiki, I believe this one came first. Again, you can see the basic structure of what would become MVC and MVC2 further up. So, definitely worthwhile being on the above average tier, I think. And with that, we have closed out the entire tier list for fighting games as shown here. Again, massive list. Massive list of things, but not all inclusive. So I will put the link to this one in the chat too. Shout outs go to Lich Massacre on Twitter for creating this comprehensive tier list. Let's see. Should be able to just paste it in here. I encourage folks to create their own, and again, send them to me on Twitter. If you've played games here and can rank them, I'm curious to see what you think. There's a lot. Penguin says, on topic of his grandmother, also, she's the only one that's disappointed in me. My friend's family don't really care, and I'm not hurting anyone. I wouldn't worry about it, Penguin. You can't really change someone's mind, so, you know, just be you, and that's all you can really do, right? Not to get all motivational coach on you, but I've experienced something similar, so I hear you. Best you can do is just be yourself, and that's it. Penguin says, good thing Wazzy isn't here. She'll try and fail to cancel you again. Oh, she'll probably go watch the VOD of this and then write down a list of points that she disagrees with, and then she'll just send them to me on Discord. It's fine. These tier lists, we joke about being canceled, but these tier lists are just a discussion, right? No one's going to agree 100% with anything someone puts on one of these. So we just put our opinions out there, and we look at the difference as part of the conversation. I honestly don't care if people think my opinions are garbage, but I also want to hear their opinions so I can look at them and see the difference. And maybe some folks who are looking at the tier list have played ones on here that I haven't, and they can rank them. That's perfectly fine. I have some ideas for future tier lists that I'd like to do on show streams like this. The next one's going to be food, I think, again. I want to do the cereal one, but that one's going to be a long tier list. Red Dragon says, you do you, Penguin, as long as you don't force it on other people. Yep, that's pretty much what it comes down to. Penguin says, I'm not. I just find it funny. I have fun stories involving her. And Penguin says, Red Dragon, thanks, and I don't. That's all that really matters in the end, man. You do you and respectfully disagree. All right, so let's recap. First off, on the tier lists, we looked at game controllers. Not a whole lot there of disagreement, I think. We had some disagreement on the Xbox original controller. That's fine. Everything else here seemed to slot in fairly decently. Fighting games, obviously a lot more moving parts. A lot here, a lot to not really factor in. But an interesting discussion. So we will go ahead and wrap things up. Penguin says Frosted Flakes is S tier. I don't know about that, Chief. I would rank Frosted Flakes above average for sure, but I'd have to think about where I'd put it. I can't pin it down off the top of my head, but let's see who's online to raid. Nobody on my friend list is active right now. Penguin says, also had fun watching, and I'm going to be filming a double rant a bit on Godzilla vs. King Kong and Tall Girl 2. Ah, I see. I'll have to check it out once you post that on your YouTube. I think what we'll do for today, just because there's no one on my list of friends that's online, maybe at some point in the future I'll go and pick some random artists, but I like to at least do a little research first so I know who's doing what. So let's do this. We haven't done it in a while. Let me pause the BGM. We'll go to the outro. We could let Pink's work rock for a minute here. And we will go ahead and call that a stream. Once again, thanks to all the folks who stopped by and hung out and voiced their opinions. For Naked Snake, who's a big fighting game person, hopefully this was interesting if you get a chance to check out what we talked about later. For Red Dragon and Penguin, thanks for sticking around and continuing to participate in the conversation. It's always fun talking with you folks and hearing different ideas and opinions. I like to think it was less of a cancel stream this time, but honestly, who knows? It was fun though. I like talking about fighting games, and we'll be doing more with them in the future. But for now, we'll call that good. I need to figure out next week's stream schedule, but we'll be getting back together next week to look at some more stuff. So I hope you folks have a good weekend, and I will catch you in the next stream.